everyone. Welcome to Wednesday in Information Radio. It's Pat Kanuga in for Marcy Markusa. She is off for a few days. Nice to be with you here this morning. It is a mild day out there. When you walk out the door this morning, you will notice that it's breezy but mild. I'll get to your forecast in just a minute. Let's say good morning to everyone here. Nolan Kaler is in for me, directing the program, and he'll be doing some weather with us on air. So will Abby Adiemi, our technical producer here. Good morning, Abby. And we have Travis Peterson putting together our YouTube show, so you can catch us, Information Radio, on CBC Manitoba's YouTube page. And Jenna Leaf is here from Saskatchewan, watching what Travis is doing. Good morning, Jenna. So right now, though, it's time to take a look at what's happening in news headlines. Here's Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, all 29,000 memberships of the Manitoba Progressive Conservative Party are set to expire at the end of this month. And 2 weeks later, the party plans to hold a special meeting to approve new leadership race rules. Former PC MLA and Cabinet Minister Kevin Klein says the time frame's too tight. We're going to hear what outgoing PC leader Heather Stephenson has to say coming up. As well, a University of Manitoba professor is happy Indigenous people are getting a say in COP28. The UN climate conference in Dubai is being touted as the most diverse yet, a full day dedicated to Indigenous people's role on the fight against climate change. We're going to hear from Merle Ballard, the Chief Indigenous Science Advisor at Environment Canada, in our next local news at 6:30.
Thanks very much, Heather.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells on the news desk. So in the next hour of the show, we're going to check in with our house doctor, Dr. Raj Bardwaj. People are sniffling, coughing, and going to the doctor. Is it COVID, the flu, or something worse? So Dr. Raj Bardwaj will bring us an update on what's happening with respiratory viruses around the world and closer to home here in Canada. As well, at 6:15, a group of Santa Clauses will be making a merriment for pubgoers while helping a local charity this weekend. We're going to hear about SantaCon. That is coming up at 6:15. In the weather, it is 0 right now. We are partly cloudy in the downtown. We're on the way to a 4 today, and a little bit breezy out there, but the wind's going to let up this morning. It'll be south 15 and then south 10 by this afternoon. Tomorrow, we're looking at a 6 before we might have some rain and snow for Friday morning. World Report is coming up next.
On Cue with Tom Power.
You got spunk. I hate spunk.
When I say that James L. Brooks is one of the most important people in the history of TV and film, I mean it. He's the guy behind Taxi, Mary Tyler Moore, The Simpsons, Terms of Endearment, and he's never stopped working. James will be here for a rare interview about his life in show business. That's coming up on Cue, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning from CBC News. I'm John Northcott. We're waiting for a key decision from the Bank of Canada this morning. The central bank is expected to leave its overnight lending rate where it is and also provide some guidance about where rates might be going. The CBC's Peter Armstrong has more.
Think back to March of 2022. It feels like a different world. Back then, Omicron was wreaking havoc. Inflation was soaring. So Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem raised interest rates from a historic low of 0.25% to 0.5%.
We think that the economy can handle higher interest rates. In fact, we think the economy needs higher interest rates to moderate spending and bring inflation back to the target.
Since then, the central bank has embarked on the most aggressive rate hiking cycle in its history. Inflation eventually peaked at 8.1%. The bank hiked its key overnight lending rate all the way to 5%. Borrowers were clobbered by higher rates. The economy slowed to zero and unemployment started to rise. Pessimism has seeped into every corner of the economy. So, ears across the country perked up last month when Macklem said this.
And interest rates may now be restrictive enough to get us back to price stability.
The word may is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence, and Macklem made it clear if inflation heats up again, he's ready to pounce. But after 21 months, it's the first real sign that the central bank is getting ready to turn the page. Peter Armstrong, CBC News, Toronto.
Fossil fuels are the focus of today's negotiations at the COP28 Climate Summit. Leaders from around the world are looking into how to phase out the use of oil, coal, and natural gas. The CBC's Kyle Bax is in Dubai and joins us now. Kyle, what can you tell us about the negotiations so far?
Well, John, Simon Steele, the UN Climate Change Executive Secretary, came to the podium and told reporters that he's not satisfied with the state of negotiations, and he was pretty blunt in his assessment. He was pretty harsh in calling out countries negotiating at COP28 here in Dubai, accusing them of sticking to their guns 6 days before the scheduled end of this conference. Specifically, he says there are many options on the table about ultimately phasing out fossil fuels, and negotiators have to find a way to word it that sends a very clear statement about where the world is headed and an ultimate decline of the fossil fuel era. And as context, some countries want to completely end the use of oil, gas, and coal by 2050, while others want to continue to use them by that date, but use carbon capture and other technologies to reduce those emissions.
Kyle, there are concerns from some provincial leaders in Canada about where the country is headed. What are you hearing there?
Well, this morning there were actually 4 premiers, past and present, taking the stage for an event focused on federal-provincial relations. There was Alberta Premier Danielle Smith and Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe, joined by former BC Premier Christy Clark and former Quebec Premier Jean Charest. Moe and Smith both criticizing the federal government for its recent announcement on methane as creating uncertainty for the oil patch, while they're also unhappy about the oil patch emissions cap, which Ottawa is expected to unveil in the coming days.
The CBC's Kyle Bax in Dubai. Thanks, Kyle.
Thank you.
In the Israel-Hamas war, Han Yunis is today again the focal point of fierce battles and great sadness. These people are racing to bury their dead killed overnight in airstrikes, even as the Israeli military is warning people they must leave Han Yunis or face more bombing, tanks, and gun battles. Reuters has footage of crowds of people outside the main hospital in Han Yunis, the injured being brought in by ambulance and private cars. Medics at Nasser Hospital say they are overwhelmed. So do refugee groups. The United Nations says 600,000 people have nowhere to go.
International organizations know their mandate, and they also know the facts. Hamas is preventing them from doing their job.
IDF spokesperson Daniel Hagari, who says every day Israeli hostages are held by Hamas is a day their lives are in danger. He says the army is doing everything it can to bring them home to safety. To the U.S. now, where tense talks are expected to continue today as Congress gets set to vote on sending more money to Ukraine. The $60 billion aid package has been stuck in limbo for weeks, and yesterday Ukraine's president canceled his planned address to U.S. lawmakers. Joining me now, the CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. Richard, tell us about what's happened so far.
Well, as we know, Ukraine funding is a priority for the White House. So late yesterday, Senate Democrats arranged a classified briefing for lawmakers on the status of Russia's war in Ukraine. Military leaders from the U.S. and Ukraine were on hand to take questions, but it did not go as planned. In fact, it reportedly devolved into a tense shouting match between Republican and Democratic senators behind closed doors when Republicans steered the conversation to America's southern border instead of Ukraine. Apparently, it got so ugly, lawmakers stormed out in frustration. Republicans are saying no more foreign aid unless there's a major overhaul of immigration policies on America's southern border. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer looked frustrated when he emerged from that closed-door meeting. Take a listen.
It was immediately hijacked by Leader McConnell. Then, when I brought up the idea that they could do an amendment and have the ability to get something done on border, you know, they got stuck.
Needless to say, this did not help break the stalemate. Now, the White House warns Ukraine will run out of cash and weapons by the end of the year and is urging Congress to approve another $60 billion in aid immediately.
Okay, Richard, against that backdrop, what are we expecting today?
Yeah, at some point a vote is expected on a sweeping $100 billion national security package to support Israel, Taiwan, and Ukraine, one of President Joe Biden's signature policies. But with both Republicans and Democrats digging in, it's unclear if this bill will pass unless some sort of compromise is reached at the last moment.
Richard Madden in Washington. Thanks, Richard.
Thank you.
Britain's former Prime Minister is being grilled about his government's response to COVID-19.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Boris Johnson sworn in earlier today for his testimony during the public inquiry. It's examining the timing of Johnson's national lockdown. On the stand, he apologized to the families of those who died from the virus.
Can I just say how glad I am to be at this inquiry, and how sorry I am for the pain and the loss and the suffering
sit down.
Of
please stop.
COVID victims.
Please sit down. Please sit down, or I'm afraid you'll have to leave the hearing room.
A protester disrupted the former Prime Minister's testimony. Johnson also being called out for holding parties during the pandemic while his government was telling UK residents to stay home. More than 200,000 people in the United Kingdom died after contracting COVID-19. 3 Ontario homeowners facing a challenging problem in their northern town are going to court. They're fighting to have radioactive waste removed from their properties in Elliott Lake. But as Kate Rutherford reports, Canada's nuclear energy regulator is refusing to help.
We put the fence in, we put the vines up on the fence.
75-year-old Jennifer Carling waves a hand towards the driveway where she spent hours digging a garden, only to find out later the area tested for hazardous levels of gamma radiation.
So all of the gardens and the plantings that are done on both sides, that was me being exposed.
The Canadian Environmental Law Association, known as CELA, investigated. It says the home was one of 2 moved from the Rio Algum uranium mine site in the 1960s to its present location, and waste rock containing uranium was used as fill. Carling is frustrated that the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission isn't helping fix the problem.
I feel very patronized, minimized. Pat me on the head and I'll go away quietly.
A few blocks away, the second home belongs to 85-year-old Kathleen Panton. The backyard is now off limits to her great-grandchildren due to high levels of gamma radiation. Panton didn't know anything of her home's history when she and her husband retired in 1999.
It's a puzzle. People don't want to be responsible.
CELA is representing Panton, Carling, and a third homeowner in a bid to get the nuclear regulator to order the excavation and removal of the waste rock to a licensed storage facility. Lawyer Jacqueline Wilson.
The Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission has said uranium mine waste is not kind of a type of waste that they regulate.
CELA is seeking a judicial review of that decision. Kate Rutherford, CBC News, Sudbury.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. Remember, if you ever miss World Report, you can hear it anytime, anywhere, on the CBC Listen app or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Good morning, Winnipeg. Good morning, Manitoba. You are listening to Information Radio for this Wednesday, December 6th. It's Pat Kanuga in for Marcy Markusa. Coming up on this hour of the show, you may have heard news reports about a surge of kids in China being hospitalized due to respiratory illnesses. Dr. Raj Bhardwaj will join us at about 6:50 with an update on that situation and share some tips on staying healthy for the holiday season. As well, speaking of the holidays, when you're looking for a gift for that hard-to-buy brother-in-law or office secret Santa, there are loads of gift guides published every year around this time by newspapers and magazines. We're going to dig into product review journalism and ask who you can trust. That's coming up at around 6:20. But up first on the show, you might see a group of Santa Clauses making the rounds at a few pubs this weekend for a good cause. We'll meet one of the many Santas participating in this year's SantaCon. That's all coming up and more in Information Radio. But first off, at 11 minutes past 6 o'clock, we're going to go to the CBC Newsroom and Heather Wells with a look at news headlines.
Good morning. Well, the northern Manitoba community of Norway House is devastated by the recent stabbing death of a 15-year-old boy. 2 people from the community, a 38-year-old man and 14-year-old boy, are charged with second-degree murder. Chief Lawson Anderson says the Northern Chiefs are sending their mobile crisis response team to help those experiencing trauma. And at the end of December, every membership in Manitoba's Progressive Conservative Party is set to expire, 29,000 of them. 2 weeks later, the party plans to hold a special meeting to approve new leadership race rules. One former PC MLA and cabinet minister, Kevin Klein, says that's not enough time. We'll hear more in our next local news at 6:30.
How you doing this morning, Heather?
I'm okay, thanks. It's gorgeous out. How could you not be happy?
So once again, I cannot be happy because I did this a few weeks ago when I was filling in for Marcy. I left my big coffee mug right by the door. I even put a splash of chocolate milk in it this morning just for a smidgen of
Just to
mocha
make it
flavor.
special.
And then I got to Maine and Inkster, and I looked down, between my seats where I normally keep my coffee cup, and it was not there. And suddenly I was very depressed. So I'm a little foggy this morning. I stole a coffee here from the CBC to try and wake up, but I'm a little bit depressed this morning over this coffee situation, Heather.
You need a little more coffee. Bring coffee, anyone.
Stat. No, we'll be all right. We'll make it. Thanks, Heather. We'll chat in a little while.
Okay.
It's Heather Wells on our news desk. I am Pat Kanuga in for Marcy Markusa on this Wednesday. We have Nolan Kaler in for me. And Abby Adiemi is going to bring us weather right now at 12 minutes, almost 13 minutes after 6 o'clock. Abby is our technical producer as well. Good morning, Abby.
Good morning, Pat. Sorry about your cup of coffee.
That's all right. I'll make it. I walked out the door this morning, breezy, and it's going to lighten up later, apparently, but boy, warm.
Yeah, it's currently south at 15 this morning, and during the lunch period, it's going to drop to south at 10. It's still a lot. So I'd advise you to hold on to your hat or something.
This morning, before it lightens up.
This morning. Looking at John's forecast, it's going to be a cloudy morning, and then mainly sunny in the afternoon, but it will be mild. And we're heading to a high of 5 today. Currently, we are at 0. And if we head to Brandon, good morning to you. You're currently at 1. It's cloudy this morning, becoming a mix of sun and cloud still all through the morning. And then the wind will be gusting 20 to 40, becoming a northwest later near the noon period. Tonight will be mainly cloudy in Brandon, and you'll be heading also to a high of 5. Thompson is currently at -4 and will be dropping to a high of -3 later today. If there's, I'll definitely keep you updated more as the weather changes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's Abby Adiemi. And right now, I should mention as well the traffic line. So Nolan is answering that traffic line this morning. 788-3093. Stalls, crashes, train delays, lights out, anything like that. Give Nolan a call at the CBC traffic and commuter line. 6:14 here on Information Radio. Thanks for joining us this morning. Well, if you're out and about at the pubs this weekend, you might just see a certain person dressed in red and white. Actually, you might see a lot of them. On Saturday evening, a group of Santa Clauses, plural, Santa Clauses will be making merriment for pub goers while helping to raise funds for the Christmas Cheerboard. Keith Hartley is one of the organizers of SantaCon, and Keith's on the line right now. Good morning, Keith.
Good morning, and ho, ho, ho.
Ho, ho, ho. Should I say Santa Keith this morning to you?
Yeah, that works. We usually refer to each other as Santa and then name.
I like that. So what can you tell us about the origins of SantaCon?
So it started in San Francisco in the late 80s, early 90s as sort of a absurdist movement of folks dressing up as Santa and going on a pub crawl. It's since grown to about 100 cities worldwide, and it started in Winnipeg in probably about the late 90s, early 2000s.
Okay, and how did you get involved, Keith? What brought you into this?
I was out and about. I think I was going for groceries or something like that, and I saw a large crowd of Santas and thought, this looks kind of fun and kind of crazy. So I asked one of the Santas what's this all about, and they explained that this is a pub crawl and that they're raising funds for the cheerboard. So next year I got to do this. So joined probably about 12 years ago, and it's been fun ever since.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of fun. So tell me how it works exactly. Where do you guys start? Where do you go? All that sort of stuff. And how do you raise money for the Christmas Cheerboard?
So we usually announce the start 24 hours beforehand on our event pages. And then we hit a number of pre-planned venues, pubs, restaurants, and other places. How we raise funds is it's a donation to us at the beginning, and we give you a sticker and a songbook. and we wander downtown raising cheer and funds for the Christmas cheerboard.
And so when you collect these donations, do you just have like the Santa sacks open, and are people throwing money in there? Or these days, everyone has credit cards and debit cards, but you guys collecting some cash? How does that work?
We usually, collect cash. Folks will ask, hey, what's this all about? Or from the Santas themselves, all the tickets to admission go straight to the cheerboard, as well as, folks will come up, ask, what's this all about? What are you guys doing? Why are there so many Santas or Santa-like things? And we explain, A, this is kind of chaotic and fun, but B, we are also raising money for the Christmas cheerboard, and we also give them candy canes.
And Keith, is there singing involved?
There is singing involved. We have songbooks. They're slightly altered Christmas carols. Some might not necessarily be the most safe for work, and we belt it out. It's kind of fun. It's a real twist on Christmas tradition and caroling.
So what's the reaction from people when they see, now I'm not sure what word to use, it's a gaggle of geese, but what is it for a group of Santas?
Flock of Santas, maybe?
A flock of Santas?
Flock of Santas.
They were a band in the 80s. No, they weren't. So a gaggle or a flock of Santas, how do people react?
Overwhelmingly, people are surprised and curious and happy. Nothing quite like seeing a bunch of Santas or Santa-like creatures out and about downtown at night.
So I'm trying to picture this. How many, what's the biggest group of people that you've had? Are you talking 6 or 7, or are we talking 10 or 20?
Usually we're about between 50 and about 150
Whoa,
Santas.
that many.
So it's a fairly large group of us. Yeah.
So you don't just wander into a bar, you take over a bar. Wow.
Yeah. We do a bar. We usually hang out for about 20 minutes and then move on to another location.
And spread your cheer elsewhere.
Indeed.
Is it just Santa costumes, or are there any other costumes in there with the group?
That's one of the coolest parts about it is there's Santa costumes of all sorts, but there's also we've had Krampuses, which is a German folktale Santa. We've had Robo Santas. We have a Bah Humbug Santa that dresses in black but has a big sign, Bah Humbug.
So Winnipeg, the
reindeer,
Humbug sign, yes.
Of course. And reindeer, elves, candy canes, all sorts of Christmas stuff.
And of course, you're collecting for the Christmas cheerboard, the need more than ever this year, as we've been hearing the past few weeks. What's it like to be, doing something for the good people of Winnipeg?
It's fantastic. It's kind of surprising. Every year we ask the Christmas cheerboard for their blessing, and we make sure, yes, we're a roving gang of Santas that go out, and they're completely okay with a bunch of Santas going out and raising money for the Christmas cheerboard.
So last question, if you have a few, you must have room for more Santas in your group. How can people get involved if they want to take part in this? Absolutely.
So we have a Facebook event page, so look us up for SantaCon Winnipeg. We have an Instagram now, same thing, SantaCon_Winnipeg, I believe. And globally, I'm not sure if Brandon or other venues or other cities, SantaCon.info for the global event page.
Well, Keith, good luck with SantaCon. What a great way to start the show. It's really nice talking with you this morning here on Information Radio.
Fantastic. Sorry about the coffee.
It's all right. Thanks, Keith. Keith Hartley is one of the organizers of SantaCon. You can find out more details on Facebook, as he just mentioned. Just search for SantaCon 2023 or on Instagram.
Christmas is a time for magic.
The talking snowman. Well, you don't surprise me anymore.
For tradition.
One just has to have a present from Santa. You do it, Arthur.
And a time for love.
Be kind. And if you really want to see what people are, all you have to do is look.
Enjoy holiday favorites all Christmas Day on CBC and CBC Gem.
Good morning, everyone. You're listening to Information Radio. I'm Pat Kanuga in for Marcy Markusa this morning. Good morning to us wherever you're listening on AM Radio 990, 89.3 FM, or maybe you're checking us out on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel. We are broadcasting on TV. I'll wave to the camera. Good morning, everyone. Nice to have you along with us wherever you are this morning. It is 0 in the city of Winnipeg. It's not very often we say 0 at 6:23 in the morning here in the Peg in December on the December 6th, but it is balmy, and we're on the way to a 5 today. Very cloudy. It's very breezy right now. That's going to let up later this morning and into the afternoon. So a good-looking day out there. Up next on the show, with only a few more weeks until Christmas, some of us are likely looking for some help picking out that perfect gift for that hard-to-buy friend or relative. Or maybe you know your sister needs new towels, but you just don't know which ones are the best to get. Enter product reviews and gift guides, which are all over the internet at this time of year. It's a popular way for publications to get readers or viewers, but just how trustworthy are these lists? And it's a whole nother question. So joining me now to talk about this is our guide to gift guides, H.G. Watson. She is a freelance writer with a focus on business and media, and also a journalism instructor at Toronto Metropolitan University. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. It was pointed out this morning your initials are for holiday gifts this morning, so thank you for joining us, HG. How do newspapers and magazines typically compile these sorts of lists, and how much actual journalism is involved?
Really depends on the magazine or newspaper that you're talking about. So some place like the New York Times, for example, they have a editorial product called Wirecutter, where they're doing like very extensive product reviews by editors and writers, and they're very clear about their methodology. Other places like magazines, they may not be as clear, but you're also depending on the expertise of those editors. For instance, a lot of people read fashion magazines for expert advice on beauty products and things like that, and those people have actually developed a really good knowledge base around those products.
So what's the business model here? I mean, who's making money along the way?
So for some places, it's just a matter of getting more people to the website or buying the magazine, which helps with advertising dollars. More common these days is you'll also actually see something called affiliate links. So that's if you're looking for a coffee maker that you're going to gift somebody, and you click on a link from a website and you buy it through that link. That person or media outlet will actually get a small commission from each sale.
Okay. So these days, I mean, HG, I get so many emails every day pitching products. And how can a reader or viewer, and we kind of call it press release journalism, right? You have to look to see if there's value there to tell this story, or if they're just pitching a product. But how can a reader or viewer know whether something is a genuine product review or just kind of an advertorial, and if there's even money or payment involved, as the lines between advertising and journalism get blurred sometimes? How do we know?
So in any ethical media outlet, they should be clearly labeling advertorial or sponsored products. So I'd be looking for that at the very least. Other places, so if you're looking, say, at influencers or smaller media outlets, see if they're explaining their methodology. Wirecutter, for example, has a really good about page where they're very clear about, here's how we do product reviews, here's how we use our affiliate links. The other thing that you can look for is, what is this person's track record? Are they being clear when they're gifted products? Do they have negative reviews along with positive reviews, or are they effusive about every single thing they get? It's really about doing some of your own research.
Okay, that makes good sense. How much has social media influenced or driven this type of journalism, do you think, HG?
I mean, I think everybody's loved a good gift guide ever since magazines were invented. But the difference is now you can direct market to people, right? So if you really care about skincare and you're following a lot of influencers who talk about that, you now have, if you're a company that deals in that, you've got a direct pipeline to people who you know are interested in that product.
So I think people who read these gift guides, yes, if there's been some actual testing, comparing, trying out, I think they really think, okay, this is something I can believe in. But with AI these days, I mean, Sports Illustrated was caught recently using AI to write articles. What's to say a bot couldn't just write a review of something or create a gift guide?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not aware of any gift guides as of yet that have been created by AI, but I think it's definitely possible. And, you hope that is being labeled as how the article was written. But again, we don't know that that's always the case. So I don't necessarily, I don't have an answer for that, right? It's something that I think is probably going to happen more and more often, and that we really need to think about developing ethical guidelines around.
So do you use gift guides for your gift buying, HG?
Yeah, I love the NPR book concierge, and, I keep telling myself it's to buy books for my family members, but it's probably just going to be mostly for me.
Right. Thanks for your time this morning on Information Radio. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
H.G. Watson is a freelance writer who focuses on business and media. She's also a journalism instructor at Toronto Metropolitan University. We're playing a few Christmas tunes here and there, some nice holiday music. That was African Nova Scotia songwriter, musician and producer Renee Smith with Where Are You, Santa? More to come on Information Radio, including an update from Dr. Raj Bhardwaj on respiratory illnesses at this time of year. Time right now is 6:30.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it is 0. The sky is clear. It's going to be a gorgeous day. Lots of sunshine, a south breeze, and a warm high today of 5. People in the small, remote community of Norway House are devastated after a 15-year-old boy was stabbed to death on Saturday. 2 people from the community, a 38-year-old man and a 14-year-old boy, are charged with second-degree murder. Manitoba, Kuwait, Naui, Okemakanak, or the Northern Chiefs Group, is sending its mobile crisis response team to help people dealing with trauma. The team's manager, Greg Fontaine, says everyone grieves differently, so they will reach out to the community in a number of ways.
Whether that's a one-on-one session or whether that's sitting outside in a land-based activity such as building a fire together, a lot of natural, beautiful things happen when you're engaging with people in a meaningful way. We don't come with a blueprint. we come with an open mind and open heart.
Fontaine says the team will visit students in Norway House to offer them safe spaces to open up. With only one school in the northern community, the First Nation says most students will know the teen who died. Well, at the end of December, every membership in the Manitoba Progressive Conservative Party is set to expire. All 29,000. 2 weeks later, the party plans to hold a special meeting to approve new leadership race rules. Outgoing PC leader Heather Stephenson says party members can renew their memberships. That, she says, will allow them to select delegates who will vote on the new rules next month.
I don't particularly like it because, I would like those people to continue to be members of our party, and certainly we will reach out to all of those individuals, and welcome them back to the party if they choose to do so.
Former PC MLA and Cabinet Minister Kevin Klein says it's not enough time. He says the party's disrespecting its base after what he calls a tumultuous leadership race and a disastrous election. The largest Indigenous group in Canada will vote today for a new leader. The Assembly of First Nations is picking its next national chief. Sheila North is one of 6 candidates in the running.
Let's take AFN back and make it for you, chiefs, for you communities, for our grassroots people.
North is a former CBC journalist and former Grand Chief of Manitoba, of MKO. The AFN is picking the new chief after Roseanne Archibald was ousted in June. An environmental advocate says the world's biggest emitters need to be part of the climate change discussion. A record number of oil and gas lobbyists are at the COP28 climate summit in oil-rich United Arab Emirates. William Goodon is a housing minister with Manitoba's Métis Federation and has attended many of the summits. He says people are right to criticize the conference, but adds industry must be part of the solution.
Industries that are perpetuating the emissions and the changes that we see aren't at the table, then it's really hard to do enforcement. It's really hard to get buy-in. So it's a little bit of a catch-22, and you're walking a fine line.
The Federation is one of many Indigenous groups with delegates in Dubai. Gooden says he sees real momentum towards change this year. Mortgage holders across Canada might want to cross their fingers this morning. The Bank of Canada will announce its key overnight lending rate. Economists expect it will stay put at 5%, but they're also waiting to hear what the bank forecasts next. Mortgages have jumped since the early days of the pandemic, and Canadians with variable rate loans are suffering the most. You can hear more national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. Christine Sinclair has played her final game for Team Canada. The global soccer legend is retiring from international play. Last night, her team beat Australia 1-0, and the crowd in Vancouver gave her a standing ovation.
I mean, just like a lot of love, a lot of support. Obviously enjoying the victory. That was my one ask of the team.
Sinclair scored more international goals than any other player, male or female, in history, and she will play a final season with the professional women's team in Portland. You can find more Manitoba news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba, and you can also check out the CBC News app.
Thanks very much, Heather.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells on the news desk. It is Pat in for Marcy. It is 6:35 in the morning. Good morning to you. I hope your Wednesday is going well so far. If you want some warm weather, well, today is your day. Nolan Kaler is here to tell us about it. But first, look at my shirt, Nolan.
It's beautiful.
I came in the other day and it said, there was a bag on my desk and it said Happy Retirement. And I opened it up and it's a WKRP shirt. I mentioned this to Marcy in the morning. It was an anonymous gift, but I heard, because I have spies, I know people here.
You have sources, you might say.
Sources. I heard that you left it. Thank you. It's very nice of you.
My pleasure.
See, radio people share a love for WKRP, even though it's 40 years old.
Exactly.
So even though Nolan is just 18, he knows the show. Okay, no, he's not 18. But he knows the show because we all love it so much. So thank you for this. I really appreciate that. And look, I'm going to stand up and on our YouTube channel. So it is a beauty of a shirt. So.
It's a beautiful, beautiful shirt. It looks great on you. And now I am blushing the same color as my turtleneck. So I think
well, and it's a large. I'm hoping I don't have to get an extra large, so I hope it still fits me in a couple of years. So thank you for that.
You can use it to wash your dipsticks in the garage.
In the garage, okay. You're here for weather.
Yes, I am.
It's warm out there. It's breezy right now, but that's going to let up. What's happening?
That is exactly what is happening. So we are 12 degrees off of what we can expect seasonally.
The average temperature, yes.
Exactly. So normally we can expect around -8. We're looking for a high of 5 degrees here today in Winnipeg, currently 0, and pretty cloudy actually across southern Manitoba today. We're looking for a mix of sun and cloud, and mainly sunny later on this afternoon with winds out of the south. Mainly cloudy overnight going into tomorrow as well. And tomorrow we're looking for a high of 6 degrees here in the city of Winnipeg. So very, very much off those seasonal highs. Brandon, you're currently at 1 degree at this hour with the skies becoming a mix of sun and cloud this morning with strong winds out of the southwest. You're also looking at a high of 5 degrees and then mainly cloudy skies tonight going into tomorrow. Again, a high of 6 degrees. Dauphin, you are at 4, which is actually tied for the hot spot right now in Manitoba with Morden and Winkler with a mix of sun and cloud in the forecast and fog dissipating this morning. A high of 5 for you as well today. Thompson currently -4, and you're seeing some light snow ending later on today with a high of 3 degrees for you. Churchill, you're at -5. Light snow ending later on this morning, and then you'll see more cloudy skies. You're looking for a high of -2 up there on beautiful Hudson Bay. Over to traffic quickly, Pat. Not much to tell you about this morning, except for if you're traveling on King Edward between Pacific and Ross. The curb lanes there have been closed today for road work, so watch out for that as the commute starts to pick up going throughout the show. If you see anything else out there on your CBC Manitoba commute, all you have to do is give us a call on the CBC traffic line. The number is 204-788-3093.
Thank you, Nolan.
You bet.
It's Nolan Kaler. He is doing my job today. Well, I'm in for Marcy. Thanks for joining us once again. It is 6:38. You're listening to Information Radio. Time for a look at business. Crystalie Ramlakan is here with the Business Report. Hello there, Crystalie.
Good morning, Pat.
So there's a new report on credit trends. What is it showing us about how Canadians are doing financially? And I'm thinking it's not great.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay.
So missed payments and financial strain are increasing as credit card debt continues to rise. So according to the latest quarterly report from Equifax, total consumer debt in Canada stood at $2.4 trillion in the third quarter, and that's an increase of $81 billion compared to last year. Now, total credit card balances reached an all-time high of $113 billion, which is a 16% increase from last year. And more than 6 million new cards were opened in the last year, and that is a 14% increase compared to last year. Now, the increase in credit card debt is being driven by the rising cost of living, higher interest rates, and the economic slowdown. And as I said, there are more people, it seems, are looking for credit. That's also being driven by the population as well. So that's, part of the reason too. Now, more people, though, are making the minimum payments on their cards, and the number of people making full payments is dropping off. And the drop was more common with consumers who have high balances on their home equity lines of credit, which may show that they are a little more sensitive to interest rate hikes because, those lines of credit are on variable rates. For more on this, here is Rebecca Oakes, who is with Equifax Canada.
I think we're going to see continued missed payments throughout next year. 2025 actually is a little bit more of a worry from a mortgage standpoint because you're then going to get the period where you've got 2020 mortgages potentially coming up for renewals, and they were at very low rates, some of those. So, it's definitely going to be a tricky road ahead.
So as she was saying there, people are missing more payments on all types of credit products. 1 in 25 missed a payment in the third quarter. And that's more compared to the 1 in 31 that missed a payment during the pandemic. So worse than during the pandemic. Also, mortgage holders are starting to miss payments, particularly first-time home buyers and those people who had to renew their mortgages at higher interest rates.
Wow, that is a scary trend. Staying with news about credit cards, Crystalie, a new deal has been made between the federal government and credit card companies. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so the federal government has finalized deals with MasterCard and Visa to lower transaction fees. So the move is to help small businesses who have to pay fees to the credit card companies whenever someone uses a credit card at their business to buy something. And so these fees are going to be cut by up to 27%. There's also going to be free access to fraud and cybersecurity services. And these changes apply to small businesses and nonprofit organizations with less than $300,000 in Visa sales and less than $175,000 in MasterCard sales. So the government says that the change will help 90% of credit card accepting businesses save a total of $1 billion over the next 5 years. So for more on this, we spoke to Dan Kelly, who is the president of the Canadian Federation of Independent Business. And he says the group would like to see similar arrangements with other credit card companies too.
It is billions and billions of dollars that is collected from merchants across Canada every year. And for small companies, they're going to see a specific reduction oriented at them. This has been a long time coming, and we've been lobbying hard to make it happen. It's good news.
Now, this deal isn't supposed to come into effect until next fall, so not right away. Also, not everyone is happy with it. Independent grocers are disappointed that they do not fit the sales requirements.
And Crystal Lee, finally, a phenomenon called shift shock is getting attention on TikTok. What does that refer to exactly?
Yeah, so I saw this on the work side of TikTok. I guess, the algorithm serves that up to me because I know what I do for a living. So, this is when you start a new job, but it is nothing like it was described to you. So when the role changes so much that you feel immense regret, this can happen if the hiring manager and HR are not on the same page, or if the priorities of a workplace change. Now, what are some of the red flags that this might happen to you? Have a listen.
Now, we all love prompt communication during the job search process. However, if you apply for a job on a Monday, they get back to you on Wednesday telling you they're looking to hire someone within a week. Run. Especially if this is a job where technical competencies are required. Think about it. If they can't be bothered to run a comprehensive recruitment process, what makes you think they're going to invest in training you properly for the job?
Yeah. So also, if the job description says something like must hit the ground running, you might actually want to just run away from that job.
Hit the ground running, or it must be self-starter. Yes.
Yes, self-starter too. You're like, we want you to figure out what you should do at this job. Wow. Also, if a job description is empty, that's how you can end up with additional responsibilities that were not under the original description. And remember, you can always try to reach out to someone who used to work at this place that you're applying to, do your research. They're doing a background check on you, so you can do the same.
You should check them out, exactly. Finally, Crystal, what's happening in the market so far this morning?
So in Europe, markets are higher, rebounding from earlier in the week. Germany is up, the UK is up, France is up. In Asia, markets are also rebounding across the region, led by Japan's markets and following a broad sell-off yesterday. Japan is up, Shanghai is down, Hong Kong is up. Oil is down 56 cents to $71.75 US per barrel. Gold is up $3.90 to $2,040 US per ounce. And the dollar is up 0.13 of a cent to 73.7 cents US.
Thanks very much, Crystal Lee. Speak with you tomorrow.
Thanks, Pat. Talk later.
She is Crystal Lee Ramlakan with the business news. Time right now is 16 minutes before 7 o'clock. World Report at the top of the clock. Still to come in just a few minutes, Dr. Raj Bhardwaj with an update on respiratory viruses at this time of year. But up next on the show, it's a difficult decision bands have to make sometimes. Do we go on without one of our main members? And that's what's been happening with Canadian rock legends Rush. They're weighing that right now after an all-time great drummer, Neil Peart, died a few years ago. Now, during a recent interview on CBS Sunday Morning, singer and bassist Geddy Lee was asked whether they would tour again with a replacement.
Have we talked about it? Yeah. Will it happen? It's not impossible, but at this point, I can't guarantee it.
So it's not only a hard decision for a band such as Rush to make, it can also be a tough one for fans. CBC's Jason Osler hit the streets to find out how you feel about seeing your favorite group with one of the main members replaced.
It depends. If you like the band just because of the music, where maybe you're detached from the personalities, whereas if you're fans of the band for the personalities, that's very different.
What's your favorite band right now?
Really back into rock again, like Blink-182.
If you went to see them and they were missing one of the main members, would you still want to go?
That's a tough one because they're all pretty well known and they have such a unique sound. Like each person there, I just couldn't see them giving the same impression. I don't know. I don't think so.
I think it's tough. If you can match the sound of the original band and it works, then that's fantastic. The Black Keys, this is a good example. It's two guys, so I mean, it would be tough to replace an individual in that band because you just have two members, right? So if you're trying to replace one of the two members, you're going to have to replicate that sound, and I think that's nearly impossible at that point. At that point, it's just you might as well just go off as a single act, right? Than try to remain as the Black Keys.
So would you go see the Black Keys if they replaced one of the main people?
Probably not, honestly.
I like Queen.
That's a great example because they actually are touring.
I actually did see them in concert. I didn't mind it. I thought Adam Lambert, he did a really good job, and even though it wasn't the same, but it was still good. It was like a nice tribute, so it was okay. Sorry, it was good. I mean, it was okay that they replaced him. I knew it would be different than how it was before, but it was still, I wasn't really nervous about it. I knew it would be good. One Direction. That's my favorite band.
One Direction?
Yes. Yes.
How would you feel if one of the key members was different?
I don't think I would like them the same. A lot of it, I think, is the group dynamic and off the stage interactions as well, right? I don't know. It depends which one.
That's CBC's Jason Osler asking how you feel about seeing your favorite band replaced with a key member replaced. We're going to be talking about bands at 7:40 with John Anerson, specifically a battle of the bands that's going to be happening this weekend and why fans pit bands against each other. But right now, here's a smidge more of Rush for you with Closer to the Heart. That's Rush with Closer to the Heart. Just time for a little smidgen of some bass from Geddy Lee there and guitar from Alex Lifeson. So closer to the heart, closer to the lungs now. We're seeing a spike in respiratory illnesses. And you might have heard the story about kids in China that has attracted attention from around the world. And meanwhile, closer to home, the Public Health Agency of Canada says flu season is now underway. So we're turning to host Dr. Raj Bhardwaj to bring us up to date on what's happening and how to keep ourselves healthy as we get into the swing of the festive season. He spoke with Marcy yesterday.
Good morning, Marcy.
So for those who haven't been following this, can we start with what's going on in China and also other parts of the world where we're seeing these increased hospitalization of kids?
Yeah, so it's been making the news for a few weeks, maybe a month. We're learning more about it all the time. But for those who don't know, there was a surge in serious respiratory infections in kids in northern China since about early November. So even though it was first identified in kids, there's maybe some indication that they might be seeing the beginnings of a similar surge in adults too. So since then, lab reports have been coming in. The World Health Organization has been bugging China, saying, hey, tell us what's going on. And the lab reports confirm that these illnesses and hospitalizations are not because of some new germ, but because of the usual viral suspects, including RSV, which is respiratory syncytial virus, influenza, and COVID, as well as a bacteria called Mycoplasma pneumoniae, which is a relatively common cause of pneumonia in kids. So the interesting thing is that in the last little while, we're starting to see similar increases, especially in mycoplasma, but all the other things as well, in different parts of the world. So, southern, eastern US, Netherlands, Denmark, among other places. So that's not necessarily super unusual. We tend to see surges in mycoplasma infections like every 3 to 7 years. And it is usually most common in the wintertime, just like most viruses are.
So what are doctors seeing closer to home here in Canada?
Well, we certainly are seeing more kids and adults, especially older adults, with respiratory illnesses. Public Health Agency of Canada, PHAC, puts out a weekly surveillance report, and it says a couple of interesting things. It says that we're seeing about the usual pre-pandemic levels of RSV and influenza circulating around the country so far. Of course, it varies from place to place. Labs in Canada are on the lookout for unusual spikes in cases of mycoplasma, but so far they're not reporting any big spikes. Although I have to say, that doesn't necessarily mean it's not happening, because, you know, if I see a chest x-ray on a kid that shows pneumonia, we don't necessarily test for exactly which bacteria is causing that pneumonia. We just go ahead and treat it with antibiotics. PHAC also declared that flu season has officially started. And so they do that based on the percent positivity of swabs that are done at 35 different surveillance clinics around the country. And they say, okay, if the percent positivity for influenza swabs is greater than 5% 2 weeks in a row, then we're going to declare flu season is on. So a couple of weeks ago, it was 6.8%. And for the week ending November 25th, the percent positivity in Canada as a whole was 7.5% for influenza. Now, side note, the percent positivity for COVID during that week was almost 20%. So if you're sick right now, it's actually still more likely to be COVID than the flu, although it's totally possible that it could be both, or it could be something else. In terms of what's ending people up in hospital, still seeing a lot of people in hospital with COVID, like because of COVID, and also some people with influenza and because of influenza. Given that the holidays are just around the corner, though, people, you know, are going to be gathering with coworkers, we're going to be traveling, we're going to be gathering with family and friends. Those numbers are going to go up.
What are the take-home messages about COVID right now? How much of a factor is it?
Yeah, I think three big messages that we're learning. One is that it's acting differently from other respiratory viruses in that it's not yet, and maybe never be, seasonal, right? It's not increasing and decreasing in a seasonal way. It's still around in quite high numbers compared to other viruses like influenza, as I mentioned. Second, COVID is evolving, and its evolution has now splintered it into a bunch of different families of virus, with different ones being more prevalent in different countries and things. But all of the main ones going around right now still have the XBB variant as their great-grandparent. And thankfully, the updated vaccine is fine-tuned to those XBB family members. So COVID vaccination is still providing decent protection against hospitalization and severe illness, especially in young kids and older adults. And, you know, it still decreases your chance of catching and transmitting COVID, but it's just not enough people have had the booster. And then the third important point is that, you know, for months, maybe years now, we've been finding more and more evidence that infection with COVID impairs your immune system to some degree. So this isn't the first time that we've encountered a virus that does this. Measles does this. But it can make you more prone to catching infections that are going around and more prone to getting sicker for longer. And if you catch more than one germ at a time, then even pretty resilient, healthy people typically get, you know, sicker and sicker for longer. And that might be one reason for the increase in those severe mycoplasma infections that are being reported around the world.
What's your advice for people who are planning to get together in the coming weeks to reduce their risk of getting sick? I mean, some of this will be common sense, but...
Yeah, I mean, some of it is common sense. I think some of it is still surprisingly not common. So the biggest bang for your buck is to engineer the space that you're going to be gathering, so that the space is safer for everyone. And then, you know, it matters a little bit less if somebody is immunized or not, if the air is clean. So easiest way to do this, so supplying clean, fresh air by opening a few windows, just a little crack, you know, just to get some airflow. Turn your furnace fan to stay on even when it's not heating, so it's sucking in fresh air. Throw a fresh furnace filter in there before you start having parties at your house, a MERV 13 furnace filter. And then, you know, it's Christmas time, a lot of HEPA air purifiers are on sale. You can put one in your dining room, put one in the living room where people are going to be gathering. If you can't optimize the environment because, you know, it's an environment you don't have control of, let's say you're out shopping in a crowded store, then wearing a respirator style mask is still a good option on a personal level. The next layer I would concentrate on is to optimize your immune system. get your COVID and influenza vaccines. Do it now, because remember, it takes a couple of weeks to really optimize the protection, and a couple of weeks is almost Christmas now. And then if you do get sick or your kids get sick, it's important to stay home and rest and recuperate until you're better, partly so that you can get better faster, partly to avoid spreading the germs. The rapid COVID tests still useful, but viral load peaks at about day 4 or day 5 of symptoms. So you might actually test negative for the first few days and then test positive. And remember, even a faint little line is a positive. So, and if it's negative throughout, then great. It wasn't COVID probably, but maybe you've got RSV. Maybe you've got something else that might trigger a life-threatening illness in someone older or younger than you. So please just don't spread your germs around, because we want this holiday season to be free of illness, which would be a welcome gift for everyone, I think.
Just lastly, quickly before you go, I want to switch gears for a moment, because I understand you want to reach out to kids who are listening.
Yeah, so remember, I've answered kids' medical and health questions before. We've talked about bad breath and contagious yawns and even meat sweats. And I want to do it again, just before the kids go on holidays. So if they can send you their questions, and then you guys forward them to me, and I'll sift through all of them, and we'll get some good questions to answer from kids.
All right, thanks a lot, Dr. Bardwash.
My pleasure.
That's host Dr. Raj Bardwash speaking with Marcy Markusa. It is 6:57. Let's go to the CBC Newsroom and see what's happening in news headlines. Here's Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, at the end of this month, every membership in the Manitoba Progressive Conservative Party is set to expire. Then, 2 weeks later, the party plans to hold a special meeting to approve new leadership race rules. Former PC MLA and Cabinet Minister Kevin Klein says that time frame is too tight. We're going to hear from him. And a University of Manitoba professor is happy Indigenous people are getting a say in COP28. A full day at the UN Climate Conference has been dedicated to Indigenous people's role in the fight against climate change. We'll hear from Merle Ballard, Chief Indigenous Science Advisor at Environment Canada, in our next local news at 7:30.
Thanks very much, Heather.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells with news headlines. Coming up in the next hour of Information Radio, well, which band do you prefer, ABBA or Queen? What about the Beatles or the Rolling Stones? With a band battle coming up at a local tap house this week, we're going to dive deep into the reasons why we love to pick a side when it comes to favorite bands. As well, in the next half hour of the show, we'll tell you about a Mexican taqueria ghost kitchen running out of an unlikely place, a pizzeria. Stay tuned to hear that at 7:15. In the weather, it's a mild one this morning. We're at 0 at the Forks, on the way to a 5. Very cloudy right now, and it's breezy, but that breeze is going to let up for a pretty pleasant day. So enjoy this Wednesday. You are listening to Information Radio. Appreciate you listening this morning. It is Pat in for Marcy. More in the next hour of the show, of course, and thanks for joining us. World Report is coming up at the top of the clock.
On the current. Canada chose the world stage at COP28 in Dubai to take on methane gas emissions.
When we think of greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide often comes to mind, but methane is 80 times more potent, and we don't always know where it comes from. How scientists are finding better ways to detect methane, coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway, this morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning from CBC News. I'm John Northcott. Voting begins today to elect a new national chief of the Assembly of First Nations. 6 candidates are in the running for the top job. Olivia Stefanovic has more on their final pitches to the AFN chiefs.
Is we're letting the government dictate to us what we need to do. It's got to be the other way around.
Craig McInnes says the Assembly of First Nations can't keep the status quo. The candidate from Alberta says he wants to become national chief to establish a reset with Ottawa. And he's not alone.
We're going to shake this country up and let Canada and the provinces and territories know we're back.
Opponents David Pratt from Saskatchewan and Dean Sayers from Ontario are also pushing for major changes.
I'm not going to be here waiting for a meeting with the Prime Minister. I want to see
and support you.
There's no shortage of issues the next national leader will face. The AFN's job is to advocate on behalf of chiefs for the more than 630 First Nations. Manitoba candidate Cindy Woodhouse is demanding action from the federal government on housing.
They committed to closing some of those gaps to 2030. We need to hold them to account for that.
But there are also internal issues following the ouster of former National Chief Roseanne Archibald. Reginald Bellerose is a candidate from Saskatchewan. He came in second place during the last National Chief election.
But what I'm asking for is a strong, united, collective advocacy.
Manitoba candidate Sheila North is also running a second time.
Let's take AFN back and make it for you, chiefs, for you, communities, for our grassroots people.
The next national chief needs to receive 60% of votes. If no one secures enough support on the first ballot, the Assembly will keep voting until there's a winner. Olivia Stefanovic, CBC News, Ottawa.
The United Nations Human Rights Chief is warning there is a high risk of atrocities being committed in Gaza. Volker Turk is calling on Israeli and Hamas fighters to use restraint. But the war today is intensifying in the southern Gaza city of Han Yunis. Our correspondent Margaret Evans has the latest.
The streets of Han Yunis are crowded, chaotic and panicked as Israel expands its ground war into the southern city itself with house-to-house fighting. There are funerals for those killed overnight, hospitals so crowded the injured lie on the ground, and people piling what they can onto donkey carts or cars if they're lucky, preparing to flee again. Last night, at a press conference with his war cabinet, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there is no place in Gaza beyond his fighters' reach. Conducting close-quarter battles, he said, eliminating terrorists around the clock. Israel believes senior Hamas commanders may be hiding in the city, but the apocalyptic-like scenes emerging from Han Yunis and the area around it will increase pressure on Israel to agree to a ceasefire.
I think the Israelis recognize they don't have the months of time that they say they need because of the pressure.
Shoshank Joshi, defense editor for The Economist magazine, says the Israeli military estimates it's killed about 5,000 out of some 30,000 Hamas fighters.
So this is not a war in which you're going to win by killing your way out of it, body by body. It's a war I think the Israelis can only win, in their own estimation, that is, by decapitating Hamas.
The Hamas government media office said yesterday that the 2-month-old conflict has killed over 16,000 people in Gaza, including more than 7,000 children. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Jerusalem.
People in Chennai, India, wade through knee-deep water this morning. Cyclone Micham has now passed through the southern region, but left flooded streets, uprooted trees, and damaged infrastructure.
Here it is got full of flood. We are suffering last few days without power, without water also we are living here.
This resident also says they need help getting rid of the water. At least 13 people were killed. Russian President Vladimir Putin is visiting the United Arab Emirates today. His trip abroad comes despite an arrest warrant from the International Criminal Court over the war in Ukraine. Putin is expected to also visit Saudi Arabia tomorrow. Neither the UAE or Saudi Arabia has signed the ICC founding treaty. That means they don't face any obligation to detain Putin over the warrant. Boris Johnson is on the hot seat today. The former UK Prime Minister is being grilled over his government's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic. Among those seeking answers, the families of those who died from the virus. The CBC's Abby Kuga-Dawson has more from London.
Boris Johnson arrived 3 hours early to the COVID inquiry in London this morning.
You're going to apologise to the bereaved families, Mr. Johnson. Did you make mistakes?
Johnson will face even tougher questions from top lawyers over the next 2 days. This phase of the British inquiry is about his government's decision-making during the global pandemic. More than 232,000 deaths in the UK were linked to COVID-19, one of the highest figures in Europe. Naomi Phillips' mother died at the beginning of 2021.
I'd like to ask Mr. Johnson why he ignored
scientific advice in the autumn of 2020.
The families of the bereaved are horrified by comments that Johnson's ex-staffers say he made as Prime Minister.
His statement, "Let the bodies pile high," rather than going to the lockdown. And
Johnson is reported to have also said the pandemic was nature's way of dealing with old people. Johnson this morning said he's sorry for the pain and suffering. He is expected to admit mistakes, but insists that his government saved many lives by highlighting the rollout of the vaccine. Still, he was forced to resign after reports of boozy parties at 10 Downing during lockdown when his government had a different message for everyone else.
From this evening, I must give the British people a very simple instruction. You must stay at home.
His written statement, about 200 pages, is already in the hands of the committee, but he has failed to provide the inquiry with all his WhatsApp messages. A large chunk over 6 months is missing. He denies deleting them. Abby Kwabasan, CBC News, London.
Analysts are not expecting a rate hike from the Bank of Canada this morning, but they will be watching for any signs from the central bank on when to expect possible future interest rate cuts. The key rate has held steady at 5% for the last two announcements. The economy is showing clearer signs of a slowdown. Today's announcement will be the last one of the year. In Ottawa, important government business is being stalled again by a fight about how to conduct important government business. Later today, MPs will vote on whether a committee should investigate a video recorded by the new Speaker. It was played at the Ontario Liberal Leadership Convention last weekend, and it showed Greg Fergus wearing his Speaker's robes while paying tribute to longtime Liberal John Fraser. Janice McGregor is in our parliamentary bureau. Janice, the Conservatives and Bloc Québécois are calling for Fergus's resignation. How did it come to this?
John, Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer, himself a former Speaker, is leading the partisan charge on this, portraying this video as just the latest proof that Fergus did not put his Liberal partisanship aside when MPs chose him as their Speaker earlier this fall. And that, Scheer says, is now undermining their ability to trust that he's presiding over the House in a neutral and fair way.
The current Speaker was the former President of the Liberal Party. The current Speaker was the Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister right up until he ran for Speaker. And we did give him the benefit of the doubt. And that's why it was so shocking.
But while the House was consumed with debating the Speaker's conduct this week, Fergus himself has been in Washington representing Parliament on official business. Our colleague Katie Simpson caught up with him at the Christmas tree lighting at Canada's embassy last night.
Speaker Fergus, are you going to resign?
No, I will not resign.
Why not?
Well, because there's a process which has been set out by the House, and we will follow that process.
Janice, how is all of this affecting the government's ability to get key bills passed before the Christmas break?
It's a serious problem. A complaint like this takes precedence over all other House business, and there's literally only days now before the House is set to rise for its winter break. Budget measures to help on the economic front, the Ukraine Free Trade Agreement. Priority bills get pushed aside by this. At the start of this fall sitting, Anthony Rota was forced to resign. Now, the future of the Speaker picked to replace him also unclear. And that risks further destabilizing a now sharply divided minority parliament.
Janice McGregor in Ottawa. Thanks, Janice.
You're welcome.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. Remember, for news anytime, you can go to our website, cbcnews.ca. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Good morning, Winnipeg. Good morning, Manitoba. You are listening to Information Radio for this Wednesday, December 6th. It's Pat in for Marcy. Coming up on this hour of the show, 34 years ago today, 14 women were killed at Montreal's École Polytechnique. Today, people across the country are remembering the victims, and at 7:35, we're going to hear from a U of M engineering student on what this day means to her. Also coming up the next half hour of the show, well, they've sold 10,000 tacos, but you can't go there to get some of your own because they don't even have their own store or their own kitchen. We're going to hear about a ghost kitchen taqueria in just about 5 minutes from now, so stay tuned for that. Also, we're going to wonder and ask why people love to pick a side when it comes to their favorite bands and battle of the bands. That's coming up after the 7:30 news. That, weather and traffic here on Information Radio for this Wednesday. Time right now, 7:11. Time for a look at news headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, the northern community of Norway House is devastated by this recent stabbing death of a 15-year-old boy. Two people from that community, a 38-year-old man and a 14-year-old boy, are charged with second-degree murder. Chief Lorson Anderson says MKO is sending its mobile crisis response team to help people who are experiencing trauma there. We're going to hear more about that. And at the end of this month, every membership in Manitoba's Progressive Conservative Party is set to expire. 29,000 memberships will expire. 2 weeks later, the party plans to hold a special meeting to approve new leadership race rules. A former PC MLA and Cabinet Minister Kevin Klein says that time frame is too tight. We're going to hear more from him coming up at 7:30.
Thanks very much, Heather.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells on the news desk here at CBC Manitoba. Thank you for joining us. No matter where you're joining us from, you could be watching our CBC Manitoba YouTube page and checking us out live on there. Also, of course, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, or the CBC Listen app, or even online as well at cbc.ca/Manitoba. At 7:12, let's see what's happening in the weather right now. Abby Adiemi joins us for that. Hello once again, Abby.
Good morning once again, Pat.
Abby is wearing the most dynamite shirt, by the way. Abby wears the best shirt today. It's like a bowling shirt with a big candy cane on it, and it's red and white.
I'm just in the mood.
You are a fashion plate, my friend.
Thank you, Pat.
Okay, so you got some, but the shirt doesn't really match the weather today.
Kind of. I can actually walk outside with this because.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, you don't really need a jacket today with what's happening out there. Well, a light jacket.
Currently, we are at 0. It's a cloudy morning, and then it's going to be becoming a mix of sun and cloud later as we wind into the afternoon period. We'll be heading to a high of 5 according to John Sauter's forecast, and then tonight will be mainly cloudy, and we're still going to stay around that -5, but it will drop to a 0 overnight as we go to bed. Brandon, good morning. How are you doing today? We are currently 1. It's cloudy there, also becoming a mix of sun and cloud this morning. The wind is gusting up to 40, and then it's going to taper down. You'll be heading to a high of 5 also this morning. And at Thompson is at -4. Light snow ending late this morning, and then you'll be having a mix of sun and cloud. And later in the evening, the wind chill will be feeling like -7. You'll be dipping to -7. And guess what, Pat? Sunrise this morning, 8:11. 8:11.
3 more weeks until the days start getting longer.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And then sunset will be at close to 4:30, 4:28. More weather will be coming up later after 8 o'clock.
Thank you very much, Abby. Abby Adiemi is our technical producer here on Information Radio. I'm in for Marcy today. Nolan Kaler is in for me today. We'll look at traffic. Good morning, Nolan.
Good morning, Pat. Yeah, one major trouble spot has come up since we last spoke that we should let people know about. Archibald at Provencher. There's a collision that has closed the northbound left turn lane, the eastbound median left turn lane, as well as the southbound curb lane. So that is going to have quite the impact on folks on their commute this morning. Again, that's Archibald and Provencher. You're going to want to watch out at that intersection today. If you see anything else out there on your commute, you can always give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That's at 204-788-3093.
Coming up to 7:15 here on Information Radio, 15 minutes after 7 o'clock. Well, up next on the show, in the heart of a popular pizzeria in Winnipeg, Roberto Cano serves up tacos. For 2 days a week, Roberto runs Berto's Taqueria. It's what's known as a ghost kitchen. It's a growing business model where restaurants cook for only takeout and delivery apps, such as Uber Eats and Skip the Dishes. Now, Roberto does it out of passion for bringing Mexican food to Manitobans. And CBC's Jim Agapito talked to Roberto about why this is so important to him.
Okay, Roberto, you are here at Tommy's Pizzeria, but you're not making pizza. What are you making?
Well, we have a ghost kitchen. We sell Mexican food out of a pizzeria. Yeah, it sounds crazy, but
how does that feel?
It feels great, honestly. We started about a year ago. We honestly just started doing it for fun. We didn't know it was going to grow so much, and out of nowhere, we started getting a lot of followers on Instagram. We started doing pop-ups. People started calling us, and now we're on Skip, Uber Eats, DoorDash. It's really good. It's exciting.
How did you find this place?
Tommy's?
Yeah, like to be a ghost kitchen.
I'm the head chef at Tommy's right now, but
so you got a side hustle going on where one's pizza and one is Mexican food?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know, I've been working here for 4 years, and last year during summer, while we were working on Tommy's, I started working on taco recipes just for fun, just to try it out. We even started doing Taco Tuesdays at Tommy's, which was a hit, and that's when we started thinking maybe we should have a Mexican restaurant business.
You're here working as a head chef here at Tommy's for most of your days, I imagine. Mm-hmm. So you must live here then.
Yeah, I have a bed upstairs. Just well, I try to take a day off a week now, but yeah, there was months where I would be here every day, and for long times, me and other people that do burritos with me who work crazy hours, just will come in the morning, prep for burritos. There's days that I will come here and cook for Tommy's, and then try to do some prep for the Mexican restaurant after, just to make sure we could fit everything together. So yeah, I live here, yeah.
What exactly are you making then? What kind of Mexican food?
I used to live in the States, and I found that Mexican food there is huge. There's a lot of culture about Mexican food, and there's a lot of Mexican food restaurants, which some of them are a little Americanized, but it's just like Instagram food, you know what I mean? Really, it looks crazy in pictures and whatever. When I moved to Winnipeg, I felt like there wasn't a place similar to what you could find maybe in California or in the States. So that's kind of what we're aiming for. Authentic Mexican food, but with a little twist. We have stuff with items like carne asada fries, for example, which is really popular in California, which is like a Mexican poutine. And then we have burritos, which are insanely huge. They're like a baby-sized arm. And we have birria tacos, which is the most popular item, honestly. So yeah, we have a lot of interesting items.
You just said a birria taco. What is that?
So we cook beef for hours. We roast it for maybe 8 hours, 10 hours in a blend of spices, chilies, vegetables like tomatoes. You get a hearty consomme out of there, so the beef is just really soft at the end, and then you have a juice which we call birria juice, and then it's just really flavorful. It's concentrated because it's cooked there for hours, and so the tacos are made of that beef. You fry some shells in the fat of the same beef, so it's a long process, and they get really crispy, and you put cheese in there and birria meat, and they're just amazing. And you dip that in consomme, which is the leftover soup you could get beef on.
Now, you said that you feel that Winnipeg has been lacking in the Mexican food department. Why do you feel that way?
I'm not trying to say that the Mexican restaurants in the city are bad. I do feel like it's not as common here to find a Mexican restaurant in a corner as it is in the United States or in the places I have lived before. So you started to see a lot of immigration from Latin countries, but it wasn't a thing before. It was more of other kind of cultures coming to Winnipeg. So I feel like that now is growing because there's a lot of a bigger Latino community here, but there's not a lot of Latinos in the town.
2 days a week doing it, how many do you think you're selling, or how much food are you selling in a day?
A lot, honestly, because I feel like our followers wait every weekend for us to open because we're not open that many days. So wow, it's hard to tell. We've sold maybe 10,000 tacos since we opened. I could even we've checked reports before of how, for example, during the summer we had Taco Week. We sold 6,000 birria tacos, orders of birria tacos.
How long does it take to make? How long were you working?
Long hours. It was because we were doing Tommy's at the same time, so it was a little bit of a.
So you were double dipping, working on two things at once.
Yeah. Exactly, why not? Trying to make money in this economy.
And your boss supports you. Obviously, yeah. I just saw him eat some of your tacos.
He loves them, honestly. He comes here every Sunday to eat birria tacos. It's hilarious. It's like, Roberto, can you make me some tacos? Or are you making tacos right now? And I'm like, yeah, I guess. I'm really happy about this group that we formed doing burritos. I'm just asking everyone to come support us. We're all passionate about what we're doing, and we care about the industry. That's why we're doing this. I love cooking. It's my career. I'm passionate about it. This food is great, and I just wanted everyone to try it, and I want everyone to experience this because I feel like food is experience. You know what I mean? You also eat food, but you smell it, then you feel something. It reminds you of something when you eat something that's good. So it's a whole experience. So I just want everyone to have that because It's like soul food. It's really good. It's not that unhealthy, honestly, and it's something different, something that you don't find in Manitoba. And yeah, the tacos.
That is the CBC Jim Agapito speaking with Roberto Cano, owner of Berto's Taqueria. I would go for tacos right now at 7:21, or even from the pizzeria. I'm not fussy. I would take pizza or tacos at this time of the morning right now. That sounds really good. Thanks to Jim for that interview. We're coming up to sports at 7:25 with Scott Regehr, but before then, we have a little bit of time for a new holiday song from Alex Cuba. The English translation of the title is Christmas is to Love Each Other. Check it out. Each other. And you're listening to your Information Radio. We're coming up to sports time right away at 7:24. And I just want to mention our traffic line. If you see anything that's happening on the streets of Winnipeg or the highways and byways of Manitoba, give Nolan Kaler a call. Standing by at that traffic and commuter line, 788-3093 is the number to reach him. 0. We're on the way to a 5 today in the city of Winnipeg. It's 0 right now, a little breezy out there right now. But yes, 5, which is something we don't often say on December 6th in Winnipeg. Scott Regehr is joining us right now at the National Sports Desk at 7:25. Good morning, Scott.
Hey there, Pat.
So I want to ask you what your thoughts are on Christine Sinclair's final game for Canada last night.
Well, there wasn't a goal, Pat, from international footy's all-time leading goal getter, but that is about all the match was missing. Canada ended up winning over Australia 1-0. Quinn netted the the decisive goal just before halftime, where if soccer awarded second assist the way that hockey does, Pat, Sinclair would have gotten one there. But for all the stats that she's compiled over her 23 years playing for country, that's never been Sinclair's driving force. And in front of 48,000 people in her hometown stadium, Sinclair told TSN she wrapped things up just the way that she wanted.
A lot of love, a lot of support. Obviously enjoying the victory. That was my one ask of the team, is that Soph and I end our career with a W. I mean, this is absolutely nuts. I've done everything I can on this national team. I'm 100% satisfied and content. Honestly, it's been the perfect night.
Her perfect night ended, Pat, an hour in when she was subbed off. And before she left the field, Sinclair took time to thank Quinn for scoring that goal. And then she embraced the player coming on for her, Sophie Schmidt. And Schmidt, Pat, as I know you know, is a legend in her own right, having played 18 years for Canada, second only to Christine Sinclair. They were roommates over the years, and their admiration last night for each other was pretty clear from the beginning. Before the match, Schmidt joined her teammates and thousands of fans wearing that iconic number 12 of Sinclair's. Sinclair, though, went with Schmidt's number 13.
Oh, really?
Yeah, an assist of a different kind, I suppose. And by the way, even if she wasn't known for them, Christine Sinclair ends her Canadian career with more assists than anyone else. In fact, more than twice as many. She doesn't always get credit for that.
Yeah, it's always goals that we talk with about Christine Sinclair. What a career. What is next for her, Scott?
Well, providing assistance, I guess.
Besides that.
For those who need it most, she's created a foundation bearing her name. And at its heart, Pat, is the Girls with Goals program. That program is going to help kids without the financial means to not just play soccer, but to hopefully to excel in it.
Soccer can be an expensive sport. And I mean, I grew up pretty poor. Finances shouldn't be a reason that a kid can't play soccer. So anything I can do to help. I had help growing up, and if I didn't have that, I wouldn't have been able to continue playing soccer. So if I can help in any way, maybe it's another superstar coming through, who knows?
And Sinclair could end up facilitating the country's next star player in other ways, Pat. She says she's keenly interested in coaching, and she is also expected to play a big part in Project 8. That's the long-needed Women's Pro League expected to start up in 2025. So Christine Sinclair's playing days for Canada are over, but her work in this sport in this country, in many ways, Pat, is just about to begin.
Yeah, guessing she still has decades in front of her in the Canadian soccer scene. Let's go from the pitch to the diamond. You have some baseball news for us on this Wednesday morning?
Okay, Blue Jays.
Let's play ball. Sorry, I have to sing along to that. My apologies.
That was beautiful on my ears, Pat. Thank you.
Certainly wasn't.
Not often I have reason to play that song in December, Pat, but since the Jays will be much more than just okay if they happen to sign Japanese superstar Shohei Ohtani, it does seem timely. Ohtani is expected to announce which team he will play for by week's end. In the meantime, his agent has asked clubs that he interviews with to keep quiet about it all. Nevertheless, reporters have asked his most likely suitors whether they have indeed spoken with Ohtani. Here is what Toronto manager John Schneider said.
We meet with a lot of players. I'll kind of leave it at that. You know, it's kind of kept between the club. Who we meet with and where we meet with them, we keep to ourselves.
Vague as vague can be. As for the Dodgers manager Dave Roberts.
Yeah, we met with him. I'd like to be honest, and so we met with Shohei, and we talked, and I think it went well.
The juxtaposition there, nice.
Just a wee juxtaposition. Roberts' disclosure, Pat, would seem to have broken Ohtani's agent's wishes, and CBC's among those reporting that Dodgers president Andrew Friedman is not happy at all about that. So could this be addition by subtraction for the Jays as they try to sign the best talent the sport has ever seen? He's going to be the best paid as well, by the way. It's believed Ohtani's contract is going to cost, if the Jays owners, Rogers, can get him, close to $1 billion Canadian.
Wow.
What that would mean to customers' future cable and wireless phone bills? Well, that's a story for another day.
All right.
And we'll also talk about the Jets tomorrow. They're in Colorado tonight.
Yeah, late start time. Won't be watching that one.
Nope.
Thanks, Scott. Have a great day. It's Scott Regier from the National Sports Desk. Still to come the next half hour of information radio. We're going to talk Battle of the Bands at around about 8 minutes from now. Stay tuned. The time right now is 7:30.
This This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it is still 0 in Winnipeg. We're going to see a sunny sky and warm high today of 5. The northern Manitoba community of Norway House is grappling with the recent stabbing death of a 15-year-old boy. 2 people from the community, a 38-year-old man and 14-year-old boy, are charged with second-degree murder. Chief Larson Anderson says MKO, the Northern Chiefs, is sending its mobile crisis response team to help people experiencing trauma. He says the violent incident has created a lot of pain in his tight-knit community.
Oh, they're devastated. We are a small community and many of us know each other. We have close friends and families throughout the community. So when you lose a young person like this, it really hurts.
Anderson says the First Nation has been working hard to keep young people engaged and away from crime. The community offers things like youth employment services and recreational facilities. But Anderson says Norway House is growing quickly and struggling with a lack of resources. All 29,000 memberships in the Manitoba Progressive Conservative Party are set to expire at the end of this month. 2 weeks later, the party plans to hold a special meeting to approve new leadership race rules. Former PC MLA and Cabinet Minister Kevin Klein says that's not enough time.
After a tumultuous leadership race and a disastrous election, I think this is disrespecting our base. And by quickly pushing some questionable leadership rules through is insulting to Conservatives.
Outgoing PC leader Heather Stephenson says party members can renew their memberships. That, she says, will allow them to select delegates who will vote on those new rules next month. A University of Manitoba professor is happy Indigenous people are getting a say in COP28. The UN Climate Conference is being touted as the most diverse yet. A full day has been dedicated to Indigenous people's role on the fight against climate change. Merle Ballard is Chief Indigenous Science Advisor at Environment Canada. She was in one of many panels hosted by Indigenous representatives from the country.
The parties need to pay more attention to what Indigenous peoples know about climate change, learn from the early warning systems of Indigenous peoples. Having Indigenous People Day, I think, is very significant. I would assume and hope that they are being listened to.
More than 70,000 delegates from around the world are at the COP28 conference in Dubai. It wraps up next week. The Assembly of First Nations is electing its new national chief today.
Let's take AFN back and make it for you, chiefs, for you, communities, for our grassroots people.
Sheila North, former Grand Chief of Manitoba, Keewatin Nawi, Okamakinak, the Northern Chiefs, is one of 6 candidates in the running. AFN delegates are in Ottawa for the voting process, which comes after former National Chief Roseanne Archibald was voted out of office back in June. In the Israel-Hamas war, Khan Yunis today is again the focal point of fierce battles and great sadness. These people are racing to bury their dead, killed overnight in airstrikes, even as the Israeli military is warning people they must leave Khan Yunis or face more bombing, tanks, and gun battles. Reuters has footage of crowds of people outside the main hospital in Khan Yunis, the injured being brought in by ambulance and private cars. Medics at Nasser Hospital say they're overwhelmed. So do refugee groups. The UN says 600,000 people have nowhere to go.
International organizations know their mandate, and they also know the facts. Hamas is preventing them from doing their job.
IDF spokesperson Daniel Hagari says every day Israeli hostages are held by Hamas is a day their lives are in danger. Mortgage holders across Canada might want to cross their fingers this morning. The Bank of Canada is going to announce its key overnight lending rate. Economists expect it will stay put at 5%, but they're also waiting to hear what the bank forecasts next. Mortgages have jumped since the early days of the pandemic, and Canadians with variable rate loans are suffering the most. You can hear more national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. Hollywood's actors have voted to ratify the deal with studios that ended their strike in November. 78% of voting members supporting this new contract. It is a far cry from the near unanimous approval the Hollywood strike writers gave to their contract, which ended a strike back in September. You can find more news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thank you very much, Heather.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells on the news desk, as she is every morning here on Information Radio. It is Pat Knuga here with you on the show in for Marcy. Marcy has some much-deserved time off, so thank you for joining us this morning. So Abby Adiemi is behind the glass, so is Travis Peterson, making sure we're on our radio on TV, as we're doing now on the CBC Manitoba YouTube page. And Jenna Leaf is here from Saskatchewan, Regina, watching what Travis is doing here, because they're going to be doing this as well. So we're doing the soft launch of the CBC Manitoba YouTube page, but we'll be really giving her in January. So you can check us out online and on the CBC Manitoba YouTube page, the entire show now and again into January and the new year. Nolan Kaler is in for me this morning. Good morning, friend.
And what a joy it is to be in for you this morning.
Oh, why, thank you so much. Great to have you along with us this morning. And you're here for weather and traffic.
You betcha. Let's start with the weather here. Currently, we're sitting at 0 degrees here in Winnipeg under quite a cloudy sky, actually across southern and central Manitoba. We'll see that cloud cover dissipate throughout the day with the strong winds out of the south this morning as well. Those will die down as well. Looking for a high of 5 degrees today. And then cloudy skies into tomorrow, again with strong winds out of the southeast, and a high of 6 degrees for tomorrow. And that is 13 degrees warmer than what we would normally expect to see on December the 6th.
Is it ever?
It is. Yes, it is quite balmy out there. Same story for Brandon, currently sitting at 1 degree and cloudy skies. That cloud cover will dissipate slightly as we go throughout the day, and a high of 5 for you today in the Wheat City. Dauphin, you're at 4 degrees right now under a mix of sun and cloud. We'll see the winds shift to the west this morning at a high of 5 degrees for you in Dauphin. Thompson -4 with light snow ending a little later on this morning than a mix of sun and cloud for today, and a high of -3. Churchill currently sitting at -5. Also seeing some light snowfall this morning. That will end later on this morning than cloudy skies, and looking for a high of -2 in Churchill. A quick look at conditions across the province. Cloudy skies, as I mentioned, in southern Manitoba, but the hotspot Morton and Winkler at 4 degrees. Steinbach also under a cloudy sky at 1 degree. Pilot Mound 2 degrees under a mix of sun and cloud. And to our friends on Lake Winnipeg in Gimli, -1 with a mix of sun and cloud. One major traffic note to tell you about this morning, Pat. Archibald and Provencher. There's been a major collision there that has closed the northbound left turn lane, the eastbound median left turn lane, and the southbound curb lane. So emergency vehicles are currently on scene. Carol called to let us know that a lineup is already forming at that intersection, and that is going to no doubt continue to grow as we go throughout the rest of Information Radio. So be sure to use caution as you're moving around those emergency vehicles. If you see anything else out there on the commute this Wednesday morning, give us a call on the CBC traffic line. The number is 204-788-3093.
Thank you, Nolan.
Of course.
Nolan Kaler with weather and traffic this morning. Well, up next on the show, Beatles or the Rolling Stones, Oasis or Blur, Tupac or Biggie. Fans have been pitting bands against each other for decades. In the past few years, rock fans have been comparing Greta Van Fleet and Led Zeppelin. Fans say the Michigan-based Greta Van Fleet sounds a little bit too much like Led Zeppelin. Here is Led Zeppelin from 1975 with The Rover, and then we'll hear some Greta Van Fleet right away. With The Rover. Now here's Greta Van Fleet with Highway Tune from 2017. Greta Van Fleet. So the similarities have sparked fan clashes on social media. And while that battle rages on, there's going to be a battle of the bands happening here at the Osborne Tap House this Friday. But it's not the hard rock. It's more ABBA versus Queen, yes. So why are fans so competitive, pitting bands against each other? For a deep dive into this, we've reached our friend, music historian John Anderson here in Winnipeg. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Pat.
Okay, so...
I tell you, listening to those two, the samples you just played, I think it's time to contact the lawyers.
The first time I heard Highway Tune, I thought it was like a deep track from something that they found, in the vaults from Zeppelin. It was so similar. What are your thoughts on those two?
She has her influences, and she certainly plays them well.
Yeah. But what are your thoughts on them as far as that comparison? I even heard some interview with Robert Plant joking about, they sound like someone, someone very close to me, yes.
Well, I mean, Led Zeppelin were a very influential band. It's just that people didn't try to sound exactly like them. But it's a whole new generation who may not have even heard of Robert Plant or heard Led Zeppelin. So, I don't know if it's a band or just a female, but good luck to them on that one. They certainly have the sound down.
Well, even the guitar, it sounds like Jimmy Page. Yeah. Why do you think music fans are so competitive about their favorite bands, John?
Well, it's rivalries, tend to arise through loyalties, and sometimes loyalties can be very, very fierce. And you like one band, you don't like the other band. You mentioned about the Beatles and the Stones. That rivalry went on for years, and yet it was concocted. They were friends. I mean, Lennon and McCartney wrote the first hit single that the Stones recorded. They gave it to them, and some of the Stones were at some Beatle recording sessions. But it was good publicity for the Stones to appear as the anti-Beatles. And I remember
right. They were the bad boys, yeah.
Good girls like the Beatles, bad girls like the Stones. I remember that. But I guess I only met Beatle fans in my teens. But it was good publicity. The bad boys of rock and roll, and they have certainly survived on that image, and still today. I mean, in their 80s, they're still the bad grandpas of rock and roll.
So let's go back to the 60s and where you grew up in Winnipeg's community club scene. Was there band rivalries there and Battle of the Bands back then?
Oh, absolutely. Battle of the Bands was usually a big deal. And you would bring in bands from different neighborhoods. See, the Winnipeg music scene was very territorial, and you had bands that were, popular in particular parts of towns like St. James or St. Vital and the North End. And the North End bands were tougher than anybody. Or the North End fans, I should say, were tougher than just about anybody else. But yeah, it was a big deal. And for bands, the thing to do was to, stack the audience with your own fans and faction, and because it was usually done by applause, or cheering or whatever afterwards. It had nothing to do with music ability or that sort of thing. It was just popularity. But yeah, they were big deals. There's one that I recall. It was on the 26th of April, 1963. I wasn't at it, but it was Nelson McIntyre Collegiate, and Neil Young and his band, the Squires, performed against other bands, probably from in and around the St. Vital, St. Boniface area at that one.
How do you remember the date? What?
I have a list of every date Neil Young ever played in Winnipeg.
Wow.
It was given to me by Ken Coblin, who was the bass player in the Squires.
In the Squires, yeah.
Every date and information about it. And on this date, it said Nelson McIntyre, in brackets, Battle of the Bands, we lost.
So, John, last Monday I saw the documentary on Much Music, and they talked about Compact de Clip, which I had totally forgotten about. But that was a Battle of the Bands. They played two videos, and you phoned and you voted for which one you like. So this Battle of the Bands thing's been going on for decades. You mentioned the Stones and the Beatles. Any other ones come to mind over the decades?
Well, these kind of rivalries, absolutely. I mean, I remember in the early 90s, Michael Jackson and Prince, there was a strong rivalry between, them and their factions of fans, and they even kind of had words with one another or about one another. And there was supposedly an incident where Prince was at some kind of an awards thing performing, and Jackson was there, and leaving the stage, Prince kind of lost his footing and stumbled, and Michael Jackson, I don't know whether he made a comment or a smirk or something, and Prince was so humiliated by it that he left the awards show immediately, went and sat in his car waiting for Michael Jackson to come out so he could run him over.
Whoa.
And these kind of rivalries, go on and on. Ozzy Osbourne and Ronnie James Dio had a rivalry. It's not like it turns into a punch-up, although I'm sure that in Oasis, Liam and Noel Gallagher had a punch-up sometime in there.
Well, yeah, for sure. And of course, Dio and Ozzy, lead singers of Black Sabbath, Dio having the better voice, in my opinion. Okay, let's talk more about the competitiveness and maybe possessiveness that the fans have. And what does all this mean, John, as far as, their favorite bands and why they're so committed to them?
Well, I mean, I mentioned the North End fans being tougher. Fights would break out. They have a battle of the bands at a community club or a church hall or something, and literally fights would break out between rival factions, and a friend of mine told me he went to a battle of the bands in the North End. He was from St. James, and he said he was just standing watching, and somebody punched him in the face and broke his nose. But fierce rivalries that existed here in Winnipeg, and it kind of carried on, and long-standing rivalry between the Guess Who and Bachman Turner Overdrive.
Oh yeah.
And the media kind of fed on that, too, because in 1974, Rolling Stone magazine did a double review of the Guess Who's Road Food album and Bachman Turner Overdrive's Not Fragile. And the reviewer said, and millions of people would have read this in Rolling Stone magazine, he said, BTO was like a semi-trailer on the highway compared to the Guess Who's pickup truck. And then he said at the end, "Make mine BTO, please."
Oh, that's funny. Well, and You Ain't Seen Nothing Yet. Wasn't that kind of a dig at Burton Cummings?
No, Ain't Seen Nothing Yet was a dig at Randy's brother Gary, who stuttered.
Oh.
But Hey You was a dig at Burton Cummings.
Oh, that's it. Okay, Hey You. I knew there was one in there, and probably
Hey
more.
You want to change the world. That's all right. With me, I have no regrets.
Okay, before we go, John, ABBA versus Queen. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because Queen didn't. I did a class recently at the University of Winnipeg doing the history of rock and roll, and I was talking about glam rock. And in fact, Queen kind of emerged from that glam rock period and then got a lot heavier. ABBA has always been light. I mean, their singles are fabulous, really well crafted. ABBA versus Queen, well, I'm going to take Queen over that one. I'm going to go and start a fight in the audience over that one.
A little harder rock. You're a harder rock kind of guy. That's right.
I'm a harder rock guy.
John, thanks for your time on this. Always fun to chat with you here on the radio.
Great. Thanks, Pat.
John Anerson is a music historian. ABBA versus Queen dance party. Just the music, of course, not the bands. Is happening at the Osborne Tap House starting at 8 o'clock. That is goes this this Friday, I'm sorry. Dress in your best disco duds, maybe. And don't worry, you can not take a side if you don't want to. We're going to hear a little Queen for you right now. This is Don't Stop Me Now. Stop Me Now. Battle of the Bands this Friday at the Osborne Tap House.
Ever hear a really good radio show and fall in love right away? Fall in love at first listen with the CBC Listen app. Find CBC radio shows like As It Happens and Now or Never and stream them anytime, anywhere for free. Download CBC Listen today.
It is 0 in the city of Winnipeg right now at the Forks, on the way to a warm high of 5 today. You're listening to Information Radio. Thank you for making us a part of your morning. It's Pat in for Marcy. For many Manitoba students, today is a day of remembrance. It was 34 years ago today that 14 women were killed at Montreal's École Polytechnique. It was a massacre that sent shockwaves across the country, leading to the creation of the National Day of Awareness and Action on Violence Against Women. In honor of that day and their deaths, events will be held across the country today, including here in Winnipeg, where a rally of remembrance has been organized by Women of Manitoba Engineering Network. McKenna Coldwell is the group's co-president, and she's also a biosystem engineering student at University of Manitoba. Good morning, McKenna.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. Thank you for joining us by Zoom today. And as an engineering student, what does today mean to you, McKenna?
Of course, as an engineering student, women in engineering specifically, for me, when I found out about what happened 34 years ago when I joined engineering, it was emotional. It was difficult. When you think about it, that could have been me and my classmates if I was there 34 years ago in that specific school. Things like this, they don't happen all of the time. But, violence against women in engineering specifically, it does still happen in other forms. So it was hard to hear that 14 smart, intelligent, promising students lost their lives, and it was difficult. So that's why I partake in these type of things annually, just to continue on, giving them a voice and someone to remember what happened to them.
And McKenna, certainly this happened before you were born. When did you learn about what happened in Montreal?
Yeah, I was in my first year of engineering when I found out about it. And from then, I continued to volunteer each year at the Price Faculty of Engineering here at the University of Manitoba. We do an annual event. So that's what's happening today at 9:30 a.m. in our engineering atrium. And when I found out about it, I was still, fresh off the boat from high school, just learning about what engineering is still. And it was hard to hear, honestly, from when that happened. I'm really glad to partake in these events today.
How would you describe what it's like to be a female engineering student now? And I'm going to ask this question preface it by, I know going to U of M in the 80s, my sister's friend was one of 2 female engineering students, and it was really rough. But certainly there's way more female students now in engineering. What's it like now?
I think there's a huge community now, specifically with the Women of Manitoba Engineering Network. This group was started a few years ago only, but we're still growing, and we have over 134 members today. The population of women in engineering at the University of Manitoba is still growing. There's a lot of work that needs to be done still. We're still a gender minority in engineering, but there's definitely a huge community of support, which is probably different from how it was in the past. Looking around the room, specifically in biosystems engineering, our department is full of a lot of women. We're at that kind of 50% mark at least. So we're really happy there, but other departments less so, and that's what we're working on, encouraging more women to join those fields.
I'm going to ask you about respect. What level of respect is there for you from male engineering students?
Yeah, I think a lot of male engineering students do give us respect. There are certain instances, and we do have anonymous reporting for our members for the Women of Manitoba Engineering Network. People do experience discrimination still today. It's definitely less prevalent. A lot of the students are very respectful and very kind, but some do still make comments where they might not have the intention of being discriminatory, or they might not have the intention of being intimidating, but things still do happen. So there's still improvement to be made, but I really do appreciate the support from the male engineering student body.
So we're not quite past that yet.
Right.
What type of changes would you like to see happen in the engineering world to boost gender equity, do you think?
I think it can start from having more women in leadership positions. I think it's really good to see someone to look up to. Even for me being a president of a club, I have first-year students that look up to me as leader, and I looked up to women in industry who are in management roles. From that, also just having more knowledge and training in EDI, that's equity, diversity, and inclusion, so that people in the hiring process can know a little bit more about it, and be able to give us supports when we need it in being a minority in the field.
Let's talk about today. Your student group will be hosting a rally to commemorate the day. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so at 9:30 a.m. in the Price Faculty of Engineering atrium, that's put on by the faculty as well as the University of Manitoba Engineering Society. So we'll have some speakers at the event just to discuss a little bit more about what happened and what we can do moving forward. And then we're going to light a candle for each of the victims, and I'll read off their names and just give them a moment of silence to remember that they could have been really influential, empowering engineers, but they lost that opportunity.
Why is it important for you to commemorate today, McKenna?
Specifically for me, it's important just because I am a woman in engineering. When I look back at those events, it could have happened to me. I'm very glad that it didn't, but I don't want these things to ever happen again. Mm-hmm. So personally, I just want to inspire people to refuse taking violence as an option, to be more inclusive, and to also just inspire women and girls to have a safe space in engineering, and you deserve to be here.
McKenna, thank you for the conversation this morning on the show. It's much appreciated on this, commemorative day.
Thank you so much. You have a great day.
You too. Take care. It's McKenna Coldwell as the co-chair. She is the co-chair of advocacy with the the Institute for International Women's Rights here in Manitoba. Now, for more information about today's rally, you can find it on Instagram at Women of Manitoba ENG Network. So just look that up. The time right now is coming up to 3 minutes before 8 o'clock. World Report is at the top of the clock. And right now, they're going to go to the CBC newsroom here in Manitoba, and Heather Wells is here with a look at news headlines.
Good morning. Well, the northern Manitoba community of Norway House is devastated by the recent stabbing death of a 15-year-old boy. Two people from that community, a 38-year-old man and 14-year-old boy, have been charged with second-degree murder. Chief Lawson Anderson says MKO, the Northern Chiefs, is sending its mobile crisis response team to help people there who are experiencing trauma. And Indigenous people play a critical role as an early warning system on climate change. That is according to one Manitoban who is at the Dubai conference, COP28. We'll hear more in our next local news at 8:30.
Thank you very much, Heather.
You're welcome.
Time right now is, we're coming up to 2.5 minutes before 8, and Nolan Kaler has popped in for a look at traffic. What's going on in traffic, Nolan?
Yeah, one major incident to let you know about this morning. Archibald at Provencher, there are still emergency vehicles on scene tending to a collision there that happened just about 45 minutes ago now. That means your northbound left turn lane, eastbound median left turn lane, and the southbound curb lane all closed. So do take care as you are going through that part of the city. If you see anything else, do give us a call on the CBC traffic line, the number 204-788-3093.
Slow going in St. B this morning. Thanks, Nolan. In the weather, we're at 0. We're going to get to a 5 today. The wind was pretty brisk when I walked out the door at 4:30 this morning. It's going to lighten up this morning. South 15 this morning, south 10 this afternoon. And it will be partly cloudy in the morning and sunny in the afternoon. We'll dip down to a -1 tonight and tomorrow. If you like the 5 today, well, you're going to like the 6 tomorrow before you might have some rain changing into snow into the overnight into Friday morning. Coming up in the next half hour of Information Radio, charges have been stayed in 2 high-profile Manitoba cases. We'll hear from 2 Manitoba justice officials about what goes into the decision to stay a charge. That's coming up at about 14 minutes after 8 o'clock. You're listening to Information Radio. World Report is coming up next.
On Q with Tom Power.
You got spunk. I hate spunk.
When I say that James L. Brooks is one of the most important people in the history of TV and film, I mean it. He's the guy behind Taxi, Mary Tyler Moore, The Simpsons, Terms of Endearment, and he's never stopped working. James will be here for a rare interview about his life in show business. That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
When we think of greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide often comes to mind, but methane is 80 times more potent, and we don't always know where it comes from. How scientists are finding better ways to detect methane, coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning from CBC News. I'm John Northcott. A key decision from the Bank of Canada will be revealed next hour. The central bank is expected to leave its overnight lending rate where it is and also provide some guidance about where it might go from here. The CBC's Peter Armstrong has more.
Think back to March of 2022. It feels like a different world. Back then, Omicron was wreaking havoc, inflation was soaring. So Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem raised interest rates from a historic low of 0.25% to 0.5%.
We think that the economy can handle higher interest rates. In fact, we think the economy needs higher interest rates to moderate spending and bring inflation back to the target.
Since then, the central bank has embarked on the most aggressive rate hiking cycle in its history. Inflation eventually peaked at 8.1%. The bank hiked its key overnight lending rate all the way to 5%. Borrowers were clobbered by higher rates. The economy slowed to zero and unemployment started to rise. Pessimism has seeped into every corner of the economy. So, ears across the country perked up last month when Macklem said this.
And interest rates may now be restrictive enough to get us back to price stability.
The word may is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence, and Macklem made it clear if inflation heats up again, he's ready to pounce. But after 21 months, it's the first real sign that the central bank is getting ready to turn the page. Peter Armstrong, CBC News, Toronto.
Fossil fuels are the focus of today's negotiations at the COP28 climate summit. Leaders from around the world are looking into how to phase out the use of oil, coal and natural gas. The CBC's Kyle Bax is in Dubai and joins me now. Kyle, what can you tell us about these negotiations so far?
Well, John, Simon Steele, the UN Climate Change Executive Secretary, came to the podium and told reporters that he's not satisfied with the state of negotiations, and he was pretty blunt in his assessment. He was pretty harsh in calling out countries negotiating at COP28 here in Dubai, accusing them of sticking to their guns 6 days before the scheduled end of this conference. Specifically, he says there are many options on the table about ultimately phasing out fossil fuels, and negotiators have to find a way to word it that sends a very clear statement about where the world is headed and an ultimate decline of the fossil fuel era. And as context, some countries want to completely end the use of oil, gas, and coal by 2050, while others want to continue to use them by that date, but use carbon capture and other technologies to reduce those emissions.
Kyle, there are concerns from some provincial leaders in Canada about where the country is headed. What are you hearing there?
Well, this morning there were actually 4 premiers, past and present, taking the stage for an event focused on federal-provincial relations. There was Alberta Premier Danielle Smith and Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe, joined by former BC Premier Christy Clark and former Quebec Premier Jean Charest. Moe and Smith both criticizing the federal government for its recent announcement on methane as creating uncertainty for the oil patch, while they're also unhappy about the oil patch emissions cap, which Ottawa is expected to unveil in the coming days.
The CBC's Kyle Bax in Dubai. Thanks, Kyle.
Thank you.
In the Israel-Hamas war, Han Yunis is today, again, the focal point of fierce battles and great sadness. These people are racing to bury their dead, killed overnight in airstrikes, even as the Israeli military is warning people they must leave Han Yunis or face more bombing, tanks, and gun battles. Reuters has footage of crowds of people outside the main hospital in Han Yunis, the injured being brought in by ambulance and private cars. Medics at Nasser Hospital say they are overwhelmed. So do refugee groups. The United Nations says 600,000 people have nowhere to go.
International organizations know their mandate, and they also know the facts. Hamas is preventing them from doing their job.
IDF spokesperson Daniel Hadari, who says for every day Israeli hostages are held by Hamas, it is a day their lives are in danger. He says the army is doing everything it can to bring them home to safety. To the U.S. now, where tense talks are expected to continue today as Congress gets set to vote on sending more money to Ukraine. A $60 billion aid package has been stuck in limbo for weeks, and yesterday Ukraine's president canceled his plans addressed to U.S. lawmakers. Joining me is the CBC's Richard Madden in our Washington bureau. Richard, what can you tell us about what has happened so far?
Well, as we know, Ukraine funding is a priority for the White House. So late yesterday, Senate Democrats arranged a classified briefing for lawmakers on the status of Russia's war in Ukraine. Military leaders from the U.S. and Ukraine were on hand to take questions, but it did not go as planned. In fact, it reportedly devolved into a tense shouting match between Republican and Democratic senators behind closed doors when Republicans steered the conversation to America's southern border instead of Ukraine. Apparently, it got so ugly, lawmakers stormed out in frustration. Republicans are saying no more foreign aid unless there's a major overhaul of immigration policies on America's southern border. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer looked frustrated when he emerged from that closed-door meeting. Take a listen.
It was immediately hijacked by Leader McConnell. Then, when I brought up the idea that they could do an amendment and have the ability to get something done on border, they get stuck. They got stuck.
Needless to say, this did not help break the stalemate. Now, the White House warns Ukraine will run out of cash and weapons by the end of the year and is urging Congress to approve another $60 billion in aid immediately.
Okay, Richard, against that backdrop, what are we expecting today?
Yeah, at some point a vote is expected on a sweeping $100 billion national security package to support Israel, Taiwan, and Ukraine, one of President Joe Biden's signature policies. But with both Republicans and Democrats digging in, it's unclear if this bill will pass unless some sort of compromise is reached at the last moment.
Richard Madden in Washington. Thanks, Richard.
Thank you.
It has been a volatile year for global wheat production. The Russian war is having a devastating effect on exports from Ukraine, and climate change is also presenting challenges for many countries. Another year of drought has pushed Canadian wheat production down, and as Madeline Smith tells us, farmers are feeling the pressure.
That was, a big hit from just absolutely no rain whatsoever.
Stephen Vandervalk farms near Fort Macleod in southern Alberta, the heart of a region that saw some of this year's most challenging drought conditions. At the end of harvest, his Durham wheat crop delivered less than half its normal yield.
The risk has just gone up dramatically for farmers in the last 2 years.
New Statistics Canada data shows wheat production across the country is down about 7%, pushed lower by results in the West. Alberta is recording the biggest decrease, with wheat yields down almost 20%. University of Saskatchewan agri-food expert Stuart Smythe says less supply could contribute to higher food prices.
There's the crop production side of things, and so if we have lower yields, that's going to potentially push up the price of anything that uses those as ingredients.
2023 is just the latest in a series of dry years in southern parts of the prairies. Leif Carlson is with industry group Cereals Canada. He says despite the challenges for farmers, the results could be worse.
The production is a lot better than we saw 2 years ago in the 2021 drought that impacted all across Western Canada.
Despite the lower yields, Cereals Canada says the quality of the country's wheat crop this year is still high, as farmers like Stephen Vandervalk refocus for 2024.
If it wasn't for crop insurance, this would be a whole different landscape.
Madeline Smith, CBC News, Edmonton.
And finally, a television legend has died. Producer and writer Norman Lear, best known for this hit show, All in the Family.
Boy, the way Glenn Miller played
songs that made the hit parade.
Guys like us, we had it made. Those were the days.
Lear rose to fame in the 1970s with his situation comedies that pushed the limits when it came to political and social issues such as race and equality. He went on to produce the series Maude, Sanford and Son, and the groundbreaking show The Jeffersons.
Well, we're moving on up to the east side, to a deluxe apartment in the sky.
Norman Lear is credited with launching the careers of Rob Reiner, Valerie Bertinelli, and Golden Girl Bea Arthur. Lear's publicist says he died at his home in Los Angeles yesterday. Norman Lear was 101 years old. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm John Northcott. This is CBC News.
Wow, the soundtrack of a couple of generations there. Good morning. You're listening to Information Radio on this Wednesday, December 6th. It's Pat Kanuga in for Marcy Markusa. Thanks for joining us this morning. Here is what is coming up. We're going to hear a little snippet of an interview we did earlier this morning about a group of Santa Clauses, plural, making the rounds at a few pubs this weekend for a good cause. It's all part of SantaCon, and we'll hear how you can get involved and what is up with that this weekend. But coming up first on the show this half hour, what goes into the decision to stay a charge in Manitoba? That's when a Crown attorney decides not to take a case to trial. We're going to hear from two justice officials here in Manitoba in about 3 or 4 minutes from now, so stay tuned for that. That, weather and traffic, all coming up on this half hour of Information Radio. It is 11 minutes past 8 o'clock and time for a look at news headlines. Here's Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, calls today for more support for young people in this province. The calls coming from First Nations leaders after the stabbing death of a 15-year-old boy in Norway House. 2 people in the community are charged with second-degree murder. Chief Larson Anderson says MKO is sending its mobile crisis response team to help people experiencing trauma. At the end of this month, every membership in the Manitoba Progressive Conservative Party is set to expire. And 2 weeks later, the party plans to hold a special meeting to approve new leadership race rules. Former PC MLA and Cabinet Minister Kevin Klein says that time frame is too tight. And he says the party is disrespecting its base after what he calls a tumultuous leadership race and a disastrous election. We're going to hear more from him in our next local news at 8:30.
Thanks very much, Heather.
You're welcome.
She is Heather Wells in with news, and Nolan Kaler is in with traffic right away. But first, here's Abby Adiemi with a look at weather.
Good morning once again, Pat. And sunrise happened just a minute ago.
Woohoo.
So it's going to be a sunny day once this cloud clears off.
Yeah, once we get rid of these clouds.
Once we get out of this, it will be sunny. But definitely remember, we are currently still at 0 and we're heading to a high of 5 today. And the wind chill still feels like -8. So don't get deceived. It's still kind of chilly out there. Good morning, Brandon. You are at 1. It's cloudy for you. Then you have that mix of sun and cloud later as you move into your lunch period. You'd also be heading to a high of 5 this today. Thompson is currently at -4, heading to a high of -3 later today. That's the chill part of the day. But light snow this morning, and then as you head into the noon period, it will be fading out.
I think you're mistaken, my friend. You're the chill part of the day in that shirt.
I'll take that, Pat.
Okay, thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
It's Abby Adiemi here. He's our technical producer here and making sure we're on the air and staying on the air. Nolan Kaler is in for me this morning. We'll look at traffic. Hello once again, Nolan.
Good morning. Yeah, the major trouble spot we have to tell you about this morning, Archibald at Provencher. Emergency vehicles still on the scene at a collision that has closed multiple lanes of traffic, including the northbound left turn lane, the eastbound median left turn lane, and the southbound curb lane. A lineup was already forming there just about an hour ago as a result of that collision, and that is still the case at that intersection as well. Just north of there at Archibald and Notre Dame Street, we got a call from Charlene. The 3 lanes of traffic are now down to 1 in that area. So a massive, massive bottleneck appearing in that part of St. Boniface. So Archibald at Provencher, watch out for that as you're traveling through there, and be sure to give those emergency vehicles room to work. If you see anything else in the final half hour of Information Radio, give us a call on the CBC commuter line. The number 204-788-0893.
That's 788-3093 if you have anything in traffic. Up next on the show, when someone is charged with a crime, there are several possible outcomes. The person could plead guilty. The person could plead not guilty and the case could go to trial, or the charges could be dropped before trial, or the charges could be stayed. This happened recently in 2 high-profile cases in Manitoba. One of an RCMP officer who was charged with assault, accused of kneeling on a man's neck outside of Winnipeg Airport in 2019. In that case, the Crown attorney prosecuting the case said, quote, "In the present case, the Crown is no longer satisfied that there is a reasonable likelihood of conviction, and as such, we're going to enter a stay of proceedings." Charges were also stayed in the case of 2 people accused of handing out cannabis candies during last Halloween 2022. Marcy Markusa spoke with 2 Manitoba justice officials about staying charges. Here's part of their conversation.
Michael Connor is Manitoba's Assistant Deputy Minister for Crown Law and Assistant Attorney General. Good morning.
Good morning.
And Michelle Jules is the Executive Director, Manitoba Prosecution Service. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
To be clear, they will not be able to talk about specific cases, but we can talk about staying a charge. So I'm not sure which of you wants to respond first, but just for the general, people listening, their understanding, how common is it for a charge to be stayed?
I'll say that's difficult. It's because there's many reasons that charges might be stayed. So there's an ongoing charge assessment process for us in terms of evaluating the evidence to establish that we can meet each legal element of the offense. But there's also other reasons for staying charges that actually beyond the charge assessment process. So sometimes there are 2 charges that have been laid that effectively are for the same wrongdoing. Or there may be charges that are stayed as a result of plea bargain discussions that we're only proceeding with some of the charges. There might be a stay of proceedings entered because the matter's been diverted to a restorative justice option and successfully completed. Or sometimes a judge has found a charter breach or made a ruling that evidence is not admissible, and at that point there might be a stay of proceedings. So there's a variety of reasons. So it actually, in the context of plea bargaining, it can be quite common that some charges are stayed in answer to a guilty plea for other charges.
Michael Connor, may I ask, you heard me quote there, the Crown is no longer satisfied, there's a reasonable likelihood of conviction. Now, that was in this case, but that is something we have heard in many cases over the years. The public may not sort of be able to wrap their heads around that, because it would sound to someone like, well, we don't think we're going to get a conviction, so that's the reason for the stay of charge. Is it more complicated than that, than just that statement, when you hear that statement in cases? Can you help us understand that?
It is, and in every case when the police lay charges, there's a responsibility on the Crown, and this is the same standard, really, or very similar standard right across the country. We have to assess 2 factors. First, is there a reasonable likelihood of conviction? And secondly, is it in the public interest to pursue the prosecution? And that's an ongoing assessment. So right from the time a charge is referred to the Crown's office, through preparing for the case and even possibly in the middle of the trial, the Crown always has to assess that there's still a likelihood of conviction. And what that means is the Crown has to be satisfied that we're able to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt, which is a higher standard than just sort of tipping the scales of the evidence in favor of guilt or innocence. So it's not enough to believe a witness or believe one side or the other. We have to be satisfied that we can convince the court, we can prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. And there's many factors that go into that assessment. It's looking at the credibility of witnesses. Are there inconsistencies or conflicting evidence? The availability of witnesses, what are possible defenses that might be raised, and the reliability of evidence. And so overall, the Crown has to assess the quality of the evidence, any problems with admissibility, and make a determination of whether, in the Crown's professional judgment, we have a reasonable likelihood of conviction. And certainly in complicated cases or very serious cases, the determination is not made solely by one Crown, but we have a process where that will be reviewed by senior Crown counsel with experience in the area to make sure that we're satisfied with our opinion.
I was going to ask you that next. I was going to ask if there's 2 things. Are there types of cases or types of defendants who might be more likely to have charges stayed? And then also what happens after a Crown attorney decides a stay may be required. Like, it's not one person's decision.
No, and it depends on the case. Like we don't have, we call it a case conference, where we'll convene a group of our general counsels, so more senior experienced counsel, along possibly with supervising Crown attorneys and directors, to talk about the case and look at all of the evidence. That doesn't happen in every case, but certainly in more serious cases, in fatalities, for example, that will be reviewed before a decision is made.
Does anything change when there is video involved? And once again, there's many cases where there's video involved, and this is becoming more and more common. I'm just curious, when you're making a determination about reasonable likelihood of conviction, and then there's a piece of evidence that is a video, I wanted to ask if either of you have a response to that.
It is another piece of available evidence to us, absolutely, that is examined and considered in the overall examination of all the evidence available to us.
Is a video weighed equally against other evidence, or is it seen as, how is it viewed legally? Depends on the video, right?
I don't know if I can, to be fair, I'm not sure that I can answer that, because it depends on the video, right? Sometimes it's somebody's phone, it will depend on sometimes it can be a very excellent piece of evidence and the quality is clear and the angle is clear. Other times it's not. I mean, I wouldn't say, it's, again, I can only really go back to my original answer. I think that it's one of the pieces of evidence to consider for sure.
Yeah. If you're a Crown attorney assigned to a case, what kinds of things in a case might lead you to a conclusion that a stay of proceedings is the right course of action?
Well, again, I think as Michael set out, we're considering the competence of a witness to testify, the credibility of a witness to testify, as well as reliability of our witnesses overall. Our ability to get them to participate is often a factor, and then again, other defenses that we might consider if it's clear on the facts, for instance, that self-defense is going to be a factor in the case, then we need to evaluate that and evaluate it objectively to see if we still meet our standard.
Go ahead, please. Yep.
Sorry, Marcy. I might just add that it is a dynamic assessment, and as I mentioned, an ongoing assessment. So you may even have a situation where in the middle of the trial, we get, or pre-trial, we get a ruling from the judge that excludes certain key evidence and determines it's no longer admissible, and that can have an impact on our ability to continue with the case. Or a key witness, after testifying, goes through cross-examination, and their evidence simply doesn't hold up, and at that point, the Crown might make a determination that based on the remaining evidence that we have, there's no longer a likelihood of conviction. So you might even end up with a stay in the middle of a trial based on how that trial is unfolding. So it's hard to point to just one factor. I think the important point is that it's really our ethical responsibility to constantly evaluate the case to make sure that we have that reasonable likelihood of conviction from the time the charge is laid right through.
Part of the justice system's role, of course, is to deter and denunciate the commission of crimes. What would you say to someone who feels a stay of proceedings falls short of those goals? Because I think sometimes that people hear, there's been a stay, and they feel like there's still more questions than answers. But maybe that's because people aren't privy to all the information, as you're saying, about the decisions and why there was a stay.
I think you have a point in terms of transparency. We have been discussing putting more on the record. I think that that's fair given our role to educate the public and try and ensure there is confidence in the system and the deterrence that you talked about. And so certainly doing a better job of explaining and being more transparent in some of that decision making, I think would hopefully assist in terms of deterrence as well.
Is there any consideration when we're talking about a stay to how public a case is? Like if it has been in the media a lot, or does that not factor in at all, Michael?
I don't think the fact that a case is in the media factors into our determination at all. Really, it's every case is treated individually, and we have to bring the same objective, impartial judgment to every case that is prosecuted. But certainly, it's a factor, I think, in weighing the public interest, perhaps, of proceeding. We certainly, if a case is in the public eye, we know that it's being watched closely. And if we have a reasonable likelihood of conviction, that's something to consider in terms of weighing the public interest.
You mentioned, Michelle, sort of some of the things that are being discussed that could be, more transparency perhaps could be an improvement. But are there other improvements that you'd like to see when it comes to staying cases?
I think our process, as I said, because of the case conferences that we hold, are fairly rigorous in terms of the expectations internally. I suppose one aspect that we have been trying to address over the last number of years is also having police and investigators submit files pre-charge, so that in fact, even before a charge is laid, there can be an examination of the evidence to make sure that the proper charges are being authorized in the first place.
And just last, after a charge is stayed, the charge, as you said, can be reinstated within a year. So in those 12 months between a charge being stayed and a charge being dismissed, and I hope I have the language correct, what kind of a review is done to decide if a charge should be reinstated?
That would generally be based on new evidence coming forward. On occasion, a witness isn't available, then becomes available, or other evidence is gathered as a result of further police investigation. It would be a substantial change in the case and the evidence that we had at the time when we stayed it for us generally to consider reinstituting a charge.
Anything to add that you feel I might have misunderstood, or anything to add on this topic that you wanted to say, either of you?
I would just say that in terms of improvements, or in terms of what we could do, I think it's quite important that even these types of conversations are being held, because I think we consider part of our role to educate the public about how the system works, and I think the media plays a very important role in that, so that the public understands when and why Crown stay proceedings. And so I certainly appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today.
Well, I appreciate both of you being with us on CBC. Thank you very much, Michael Connor.
Thank you.
And thank you very much, Michelle Jules.
Thank you.
Michael Connor is Manitoba's Assistant Deputy Minister for Crown Law and Assistant Attorney General, and Michelle Jules, the Executive Director of the Manitoba Prosecution Service. They were speaking with Marcy Markusa. We are 3 minutes away from Heather's News at the bottom of the clock, but first, I just want to play a little snippet of something that we had earlier on the show in the first half hour, because it was so much fun. If you're out and about this weekend, you might just see a whole lot of Santas. On Saturday evening, a group of Santa Clauses are going to be making the rounds of pubs and making some fun for people and helping raise funds for the Christmas Cheerboard. Keith Hartley is one of the organizers of SantaCon. I spoke with him right out of the gate this morning at 6:15, and I asked him how he got involved in the first place.
I was out and about. I think I was going for groceries or something like that, and I saw a large crowd of Santas and thought, this looks kind of fun and kind of crazy. So I asked one of the Santas what's this all about, and they explained that this is a pub crawl and that they're raising funds for the cheerboard. So next year I got to do this. So I joined probably about 12 years ago, and it's been fun ever since.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of fun. So tell me how it works exactly. Where do you guys start? Where do you go? All that sort of stuff. And how do you raise money for the Christmas Cheerboard?
So we usually announce the start 24 hours beforehand on our event pages. And then we hit a number of pre-planned venues, pubs, restaurants, and other places. How we raise funds is it's a donation to us at the beginning, and we give you a sticker and a songbook, and we wander downtown raising cheer and funds for the Christmas Cheerboard.
So what's the reaction from people when they see, now I'm not sure what word to use, it's a gaggle of geese, but what is it for a group of Santas?
Flock of Santas, maybe?
A flock of Santas?
Flock of Santas.
They were a band in the 80s. No, they weren't. So a gaggle or a flock of Santas, how do people react?
Overwhelmingly, people are surprised and curious and happy. Nothing quite like seeing a bunch of Santas or Santa-like creatures out and about downtown at night.
And we're not talking 5 or 10 Santas. We're talking like 40 or 50 Santas. A lot of fun. So that's Keith Hartley. He's one of the organizers of SantaCon. I spoke with Keith earlier this morning here on Information Radio. You can hear our full conversation over the CBC Listen app, and you can find out more details about SantaCon on Facebook. You can just search SantaCon 2023. And I will mention just before we're off the air at 8:37, anything to let us know about last minute and traffic, 788-3093. Nolan Kaler is standing by to take your calls. The time right now is 8:30.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it's still 0 in Winnipeg. We will climb a little bit. We're headed to a mild 5 today. Lots of sunshine as well. The northern Manitoba community of Norway House is grappling with the recent stabbing death of a 15-year-old boy. 2 people from the community, a 38-year-old man and a 14-year-old boy, are charged with second-degree murder. Chief Larson Anderson says MKO is sending its mobile crisis response team to help people who are experiencing trauma. Anderson says the violent incident has created a lot of pain in his tight-knit community.
Community, and many of us know each other. We have close friends and families throughout the community. So when you lose a young person like this, it really hurts.
And Anderson says the First Nation has been working hard to keep young people engaged and away from crime. The community offers things like youth employment services and recreational facilities, but he says Norway House is growing quickly and struggling with a lack of resources. Well, all 29,000 memberships in the Manitoba Progressive Conservative Party are set to expire at the end of this month. And then, 2 weeks later, the party plans to hold a special meeting to approve new leadership race rules. Former PC MLA and Cabinet Minister Kevin Klein says the time frame is too tight.
After a tumultuous leadership race and a disastrous election, I think this is disrespecting our base, and by quickly pushing some questionable leadership rules through is insulting to Conservatives.
Outgoing PC leader Heather Stephenson says party members can renew their memberships. That, she says, will allow them to select delegates who will vote on the new rules next month. An environmental advocate says the world's biggest emitters need to be part of the climate change discussion. A record number of oil and gas lobbyists are at the COP28 climate summit in the oil-rich United Arab Emirates. William Goodon is housing minister with Manitoba's Métis Federation and has been at many of these summits. He says people are right to criticize the conference, but adds industry has to be part of the solution.
Industries that are perpetuating the emissions and the changes that we see aren't at the table, then it's really hard to do enforcement. It's really hard to get buy-in. So it's a little bit of a catch-22, and you're walking a fine line.
The MMF is one of many Indigenous groups with delegates in Dubai. Goodon sees real momentum, he says, towards change this year. The Assembly of First Nations is electing its new national chief today.
Let's take AFN back and make it for you, chiefs, for you communities, for our grassroots people.
Sheila North, former Northern Manitoba Grand Chief, is one of 6 candidates in the running. AFN delegates are in Ottawa voting today, which comes after former National Chief Roseanne Archibald was voted out of office back in June. Later this morning, the Bank of Canada makes its final interest rate setting of the year. And after 21 months of almost steady increases, it appears the central bank feels it is safe to hold the line as we close out 2023. The bank's influential borrowing rate is currently at 5%. Well, he was a force in television in the 1970s.
Boy, the way Glenn Miller played
Songs that made the hit parade.
Guys like us, we had it made. Those were the days.
And you knew where you were.
Norman Lear, producer of that show, has died. The producer made TV topical in the 1970s with the sitcom All in the Family. He died last night. And Lear was behind not just All in the Family, but also The Jeffersons and Maude, Sanford and Son, Good Times, just to name a few. Norman Lear was 101 years old. And you can find more news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Okay, Heather, what goes through your mind when you hear that theme?
Oh my goodness, Archie Bunker.
Yep. And for us, it was on the small TV on at the dinner table because it was on right before 24 Hours on CBC television back in the 70s when I was a little tot.
And you know what? My grandma, this little Romanian woman, her favorite show was The Jeffersons. She would watch that every day.
A spin-off. And Maude was a spin-off. And,
yes, so many shows.
And Norman Lear was active in the entertainment business and still writing and producing things. Like, I saw an interview with him about a year ago. So what a career and the legacy of that guy in the entertainment industry.
What influence that one man can have, right?
Thank you for the morning, Heather Wells.
You're welcome. Thank you.
She is Heather Wells. I am Pat Kanuga, in for Marcy, and Nolan Kaler is in for me with about 90 seconds to go. What's going on, weather and traffic?
Let's start with traffic because we've got a couple of new things to tell you about. If you're on the westbound Abinogi-Mikana approaching River, a stalled car blocking the westbound median lanes, so keep right to get around that. Also, Notre Dame from Tecumseh to Arlington, the westbound curb and median lanes are both closed because of communications work, so you'll have to keep right to get around that. But the good news in traffic, Archibald and Provencher, the big trouble spot from this morning, that has now been cleared out of the way, and the lines are starting to dissipate in that part of the city. 0 degrees right now in Winnipeg, shooting for a high of 5 degrees, and cloudy skies becoming a mix of sun and cloud across the province, really, as we head into the later parts of this morning. And it's kind of beautiful, actually, looking out here in the window to see the sun poking out through that mix of sun and cloud. Not as beautiful as that shirt you're wearing, though, Pat Kanuga, so thank you so much for donning it, and thank you for
WKRP turkey, the great turkey drop, which Nolan left on my desk a couple of days ago as a retirement gift. Thank you very much, Nolan. I love WKRP. I love the shirt, and thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you, listeners, for joining us this morning on the show. Always great. Always enjoy filling in for Marcy, so thank you for listening here this morning on InfoRad. And Marge Dowhouse is coming up on Radio Noon at 12:06. And Brittany Greenslade is in for Faith Fandal on Up to Speed this afternoon as well. So thank you for making CBC Manitoba a part of your listening day. Enjoy your Wednesday, everyone. Enjoy that +5 today. Have a good day. The Current is coming up next.